Chapter 221, Zijin Palace. As soon as Hushi entered Zijin Palace, she couldn't help but crinkle her eyebrows. From the outside it seemed like Zijin Palace was very imposing and majestic, but once you had walked through the entrance, you were presented with an absolutely empty room. After entering, the entire room was plainly visible. It was approximately only 100 square meters in size, and there didn't appear to be any stairs or doors leading into other rooms. It seemed that Zijin Palace's interior didn't match the exterior. The most eye-catching thing in the room was an earth-based 8 trigram engraved in the center of the room on the floor. Arranged in the center of it was a huge purple-gold furnace. From its outward appearance, it appeared somewhat old-fashioned and unremarkable, yet at first glance, Hushi had felt that this furnace must be 100 times more precious than the furnace in Hell King Manor. It seemed that the owner of Zijin Palace was an alchemist master. So the inheritance here is also related to alchemy? Thinking of this, Hushi's interest rose a bit. Although she had the overflowing cauldron pill scripture in her hands, many of the spiritual plants required for refining couldn't be found in Luo continent. In fact, most were unheard of. Moreover, apart from the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, she didn't actually have any refining tools. If the inheritance of Zijin Palace included treasures like this furnace, then that's great. The little golden dragon on Hushi's arm shook his head, and with a proud and arrogant expression on his face, he said, "Little girl, do you see it? This is what countless martial artists yearn for. They all dream of obtaining the divine-level inheritance of Zijin Palace. If you want to know how to begin the acceptance test, you have to properly serve this king." The little golden dragon was still speaking when it suddenly grunted in shock, and looked at Hushi with an unreadable expression. A small, light golden ball of spiritual fire was flickering on Hushi's fingertips, before she then gently tossed it into the furnace. As soon as the light golden ball of spiritual fire entered the furnace, it began to spread along the furnace wall, forming an irregular circle. While this was happening, the color of the flame kept changing. The little golden dragon pointed at the ignited furnace, stuttering, How did you know you must release spiritual fire in there?" "No. That's wrong. Girl, aren't you only on foundation establishment stage? Since when has a martial artist on foundation establishment stage been able to release spiritual fire, and moreover, a very high-level spiritual fire? This is simply..." Really, at first he had only wanted to show off in front of this girl, to have her properly serve him, to make her beseech him for half a day, and then he would share a wisp of his dragon fire with her. Who knew she would unexpectedly open up the test of inheritance using spiritual fire that only a martial artist higher than foundation establishment stage should possess? In the end, what's the identity of this girl? Hushi ignored the little golden dragon's shock and approached the side of the furnace, checking on the state of the spiritual fire. But just as she was about to approach the furnace, abruptly, an intense purple light bloomed in front of her eyes. Soon after, a wisp of light gray smoke curled upwards from the center of the furnace towards her face. Hushi was shocked, and instinctively wanted to avoid it. Just then, she heard the anxious shouts of the little golden dragon, "Hey, don't move. Stupid girl, that is the divine sense's mark and represents the start of the test. Why on earth are you avoiding it?" Hushi stopped moving, and that wisp of light gray smoke quickly bore into the space between her eyebrows. The next moment, a powerful surge of spiritual power encircled her entire body, causing her consciousness to become blurry. And so, the light gray smoke steadily continued to drift out of the furnace and surround Hushi. Gradually, it covered her whole body, making it seem like she was merging with the smoke. Chapter 222, Moha Inheritance. The little golden dragon's voice lost its proud and lovably annoying tone as it turned solemn, heavily resonating in Hushi's ears as it said, "Now that your mind has been imprinted with the previous owner's divine knowledge, the door to the trial has officially opened. Remember, when you accept the trial you have to concentrate, you cannot get distracted and don't stop. If the test is interrupted, it will lead to your cultivation base being broken off, and you will lose your life. Do you understand?" Hushi nodded slightly, and soon after slowly dispelled the distracting thoughts in her mind. Closing her eyes, she entered a meditation practice mode. And so the light gray smoke curling around Hushi's body slowly gathered together, gradually disappearing into her, as if completely melding with her. With that, she felt a mysteriously powerful force enter her body in a split second, causing her whole person to feel like it had been brought into a void. The spiritual power in her body began to move uncontrollably, and the empty space in her dantian where it had been stored, slowly started to grow larger. Steadily, her cultivation base that had already attained foundation establishment stage began to rise. Hashi felt delighted. She hadn't expected that the inheritance of Zijin Palace would unexpectedly enhance her cultivation base. Could it be that this inheritance didn't only involve alchemy and wasn't so simple? However, the next moment, Hashi's complexion suddenly changed. An intense pain came from her chest, and soon after, a pain that felt like someone was using a blade to cut into her meridians, and 4 limbs spread throughout her body in a flash. Next, Hashi felt like countless ants were creeping along her bones and biting her bone marrow. Such pain was beyond what an ordinary person would be able to endure. The sound of a groan slipped out from Hashi's mouth. She wanted to abandon her meditative position and examine what was happening with her body. Just then, a deep and magnetic voice leisurely spoke in her ears. If you desire to learn my Moha inheritance, spirit, determination, innate talent, not a single one is indispensable. Little girl, your innate talent is pretty good, but it's still far from enough. If you want to receive my Moha inheritance, you must first go through a burning heart and eroding bones, forged body and refined soul trial. This can be regarded as a beginner qualification. Burning heart and eroding bones? Forged body and refined soul? Hashi resisted the pain with great difficulty, and lifting her eyes, she was bewildered as she saw the slender figure of a man. The man's features were indistinguishable, but his body emitted a one-of-a-kind presence, like he had an immortal aura, one that could make people unconsciously want to lower their guard and bow in reverence. Hashi forced herself to concentrate with great difficulty, and looked at him as she asked, "Are you the master of this secret territory?" The man smiled faintly, shaking his head as he said, "I'm merely the remaining imprint from Zijin's soul, the divine knowledge, so I'm not really the master. Little girl, the pain of burning heart and forged body you experienced just a moment ago was merely the beginning, a small sample. The real pain is simply unimaginable. If you want to back out now, I can break off the inheritance imprint for you and you won't be hurt." Hashi frowned but didn't speak. The man sighed and said, "Ordinary people absolutely aren't able to endure the pain of burning heart and forged body. Little girl, since your cultivation base is only at foundation establishment stage, it's absolutely impossible for you to pass. This is the reason I set up restrictions so that only gold core stage martial artists or higher can enter the secret territory's inner core. If you choose to give up now, you won't lose anything, but once the trial starts, you will undoubtedly die if you fail to pass. Ordinary people can't endure it." But since when was she, Hashi, an ordinary person? Thinking back, this was like the time when she was still training in the organization. She sat with her eyes closed in a cage, and she didn't eat or drink for 3 days and nights straight. During that time, she wrestled with her comrades and fought with wild animals, and when she came out, none of the flesh on her body was still intact. Chapter 223. Do your best at that time. In order to complete missions, she could motionlessly lurk in a wilderness full of poisonous insects for 7 days and nights, all for the purpose of striking the lethal blow. So would an insignificant pain like burning heart and forged body make her yield? Hashi sneered, her gaze suddenly becoming resolute. "What should I do to pass this trial?" The man seemed surprised for a moment, then he lightly laughed. "I really haven't seen such determined eyes for quite a while." After a pause, his smile vanished and he continued, "Passing this first trial is actually very simple. You only need to keep circulating your spiritual power around your body during this painful torture, until the trial ends. Remember, your spiritual power must keep moving, it can't stop even for a moment. If it stops, your bones and meridians will immediately be jolted apart and you'll die. Little girl, don't think that this kind of trial is very easy. With such a tremendous amount pain, your mind will be unable to concentrate, while your divine sense will also become weaker. If you want to control your spiritual power, you must use willpower and determination 100 times more focused than usual." "I understand." Hashi's face was tranquil as she nodded, not a trace of nervousness or fear in her eyes. A touch of admiration flashed in the man's eyes, and he lightly laughed as he said, Since that's the case, then let's begin. The man's voice had just faded, when a portion of ice-cold spiritual power wrapped around Hush's body. In a flash, intense pain assaulted her 4 limbs, bones, and internal organs once again. However, this time, she clenched her jaws tightly, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes as she steadily began to circulate her spiritual power. A corner of the man's mouth hooked up, and as the dense mist that covered his face dispersed, it revealed refined and handsome features. His pensive gaze landed on Hushi as she meditated cross-legged on the floor, and it was quite a long time before he chuckled. "Little girl, if you really are able to endure this trial, then there will be great benefits to your cultivation in the future. But really, the fact remains that passing this trial is extremely difficult, so do your best. For a martial artist only on foundation establishment stage, enduring a trial of such severe torture of her willpower and determination will help wield her soul into something extremely stable. Afterwards, when she advances and encounters the demon inside her heart and bottlenecks, she will be able to break through with far less effort than other martial artists. A foundation establishment stage martial artist wants to obtain the Mohar inheritance." "Hehe, interesting." The man's voice slowly faded out, and his figure gradually disappeared in the void. Only Hushi remained in the void, maintaining a meditative position as she endured the acutely painful torment. And so at this moment in Zijin Palace, the little golden dragon was lying on his stomach across Hushi's shoulders with a pleased expression on his face as he continuously absorbed the overflow of spiritual power coming off of Hushi's body. He was using this spiritual power to flush the impurities out of his body, resulting in his previously dull dragon scales to slowly become glossy and shiny. On top of that, his small body, which had only been about the length of a finger, had also slightly lengthened. You, this rotten egg, you deceived my mother. I'll beat you to death." Abruptly, the little golden dragon felt his body heavily hit by someone, and as he immediately stumbled and fell from Hush's shoulder, he heard the voice of an angry child. The little golden dragon was lucky, and narrowly avoided the miserable fate of falling to the ground by using his tail and hooking it around Hush's neck. As soon as he had steadied himself and looked up, he saw a pink little pig standing not too far away and glaring straight at him with anger in his eyes, as if he wanted to skin him alive. The little golden dragon saw this adorable little pig, and he didn't know why, but his anger at being hit was suddenly doused, like water being poured over fire. He subconsciously used a slightly gentler voice as he asked, "Where did you come from, little pig? How can you enter Zijin Palace? Don't you know it's very dangerous here?" Chapter 224, Conversation between Spirit Pets. "You're a bad guy. Don't fake kindness. I already know you deceived mother into accepting that something inheritance, so now mother is in pain. If mother dies, I'll bite you to death." What? This little pink pig was without a doubt Dandan. He and Hush's life essences were connected. In Hush's space he saw all that Hushi experienced, and although he couldn't feel what she was feeling, he still knew that something was wrong. He didn't quite understand the meaning of inheritance, but what he did know is that his mother was now in pain, a lot of pain, and he didn't want his mother in pain. The little golden dragon gaped in shock, and glancing at the pale complexion of Hushi as she meditated next to him, he suddenly had a realization and said, "You're this little girl's spirit pet? Arth, is her brain rotten? How could she accept such a useless little pig as her spirit pet?" One must know that once a martial artist accepts a spirit pet, he's accepting them for a lifetime. The spirit pet and the martial artist's life essence will then be strongly tied together. Because the contract between a martial artist and a spirit pet consumes a lot of life essence, a martial artist wouldn't usually accept a useless animal as a spirit pet. He's the majestic golden dragon, and now he's unexpectedly become a spirit pet together with this little pig. This is too outrageous. Dandan isn't a little pig. Dandan was so angry that his both cheeks bulged. Then, after he pounced towards this hateful little dragon, he bit him on his tail. "Scoundrel, you better return my mother now." "Oh, don't bite, don't bite." The little golden dragon shouted and cried. He wanted to shake off this little pig, but since his tail was being bitten by him, he couldn't even use his techniques and could only shout, "Your mother has a great opportunity, and if she can endure this trial, she can gain Countess benefit. How are you not able to differentiate between good and bad, and instead, You prefer to question my good intentions. Dandan finally released the little golden dragon's tail, yet his expression was one of profound sadness rather than relief. But I heard that handsome big brother say that if Mother doesn't pass the trial, that she will die. What? Dandan doesn't want Mother to die. Rest assured, your mother is extremely powerful, so she'll definitely pass this trial. It isn't that difficult, so don't cry. Dandan rubbed at his tears as he happily asked, really? Mother will really be okay? Of course. The little golden dragon felt guilty and averted his eyes, then laughed out loud. I'm your mother's newly accepted spirit pet. Since master and spirit pet share both honor and disgrace, how could I deceive her? Hearing that, Dandan immediately lit up with a happy smile, and he looked at the little golden dragon with a gaze brimming with kindness and adoration. The little golden dragon's conscience felt heavier, and he kept his gaze averted. What he didn't say was that the agreement sealed between himself and Hushi was an equality contract, and that he had only urgently signed the contract with Hushi because she had the abundant dragon ring. The abundant dragon ring had been necessary for him to be able to untie the seal, allowing him to leave that sealed space. As long as he could leave that sealed space, he would be able to slowly gain his strength back. In the future, when his strength surpassed Hushi's, it wouldn't be a difficult matter to undo the contract and dump her. And if Hushi died during their contracted time, the little golden dragon would naturally receive some damage, but it would only be a minor injury, with his cultivation base dropping a little. Later on, he could still find another person to sign a contract with him again. But seeing this adorable little pink pig's worshipping expression before his eyes, the little golden dragon suddenly thought that maybe becoming this little girl's spirit pet wasn't so bad. Oh, how about I find a way that will allow her to pass the trial? The little golden dragon coughed, but just as he was about to speak, his expression abruptly changed slightly and he whispered, "Don't speak, someone's coming." Chapter 225, Feng Lianying's Jealousy. One dragon and one pig, both of them quietly and rapidly moved to the doorframe and peeped out through a crack. What they saw was an elegant woman dressed in a white muslin skirt standing straight outside the palace, her bright eyes deeply examining Zijin Palace. The little golden dragon laughed mischievously and complacently said, "I don't know what methods that brat used to enter the secret territory's internal core, but it won't be so easy for her to enter Zijin Palace. If it weren't for me lending a hand to your mother, she absolutely wouldn't have been able to reach the entrance of Zijin Palace. So rest assured, for the time being she won't come inside, and by the time she does manage to enter, your mother's acceptance of the inheritance will already be completed." Receiving even more of Dandan's worshipping gaze, the little golden dragon triumphantly nodded his small head. However, the next moment, the proud look on his face turned into one of shock. Watching outside the palace, he noticed that the woman dressed in white took out the piece of a jade tablet, and as her red lips lightly moved, the jade tablet flew high in the air and suddenly released a blue light. In the next moment, the door of Zijin Palace unexpectedly opened itself without even a gust of wind, and the woman standing outside the palace laughed quietly as she slowly walked towards the door. The little golden dragon's complexion changed greatly, and with a strong burst of wind under his feet, two small bodies rose into the sky and quickly fled forwards, sliding to hide under a corner of the lower hem of Hushi's skirt. Feng Lianying retrieved the jade tablet, and as she faced the wide-open door of Zijin Palace, a smile full of relief appeared on her face. Since Zijin Palace hadn't disappeared, and the restriction on the door was still there, then that meant that the inheritance hadn't been taken away yet. That's great, luckily she came fast enough. And fortunately she had this spell-breaking jade tablet in her hands that was given to her by Master so she could easily enter Zijin Palace. Feng Lianying leisurely marched into the palace, and since the inside of the palace wasn't all that large, she could see what was currently happening with just a glance. Sitting cross-legged and concentrating beside Zijin Furnace was Hushi. Feng Lianying's eyes suddenly widened, and a mysterious light of disbelief flashed in her eyes. It's that stinky boy. Precisely the one who was extremely intimate with Brother Yu, that bullshit personal doctor. However, isn't his cultivation base just at Qi refining stage? How could he enter the internal core of the secret territory? And how could he even attempt to receive Zijin Palace's inheritance trial? Did he also use a secret method to bypass the restrictions of the secret territory? Who was it that helped him to come here and compete in gaining the inheritance with me? Don't tell me, was it Brother Yu? With this thought, Feng Lianying's elegant features twisted, her gaze brimming with hate and bitter resentment as she looked at Hushi. There were no lights or windows in Zijin Palace, but there was a kind of radiance in the palace that lit everything up, and at this moment, that radiance was shining upon Hushi's face. This light clearly revealed a flawless complexion before Feng Lianying's eyes. Lips the color of vermilion, eyebrows such a deep black that they seemed like they were painted, and skin as perfect as white jade, exquisite and translucent. His long eyelashes fluttered like tiny fans and cast faint silhouettes upon his cheeks. Even though this was the face of a man, it was actually more outstanding than her own to some degree. What if this was a woman, what kind of evil would she be? And what kind of peerless talent and devastatingly beautiful woman would she be? Feng Lianying firmly gritted her teeth, and suddenly, a corner of her mouth stretched into a sly smile. Heaven has a path yet you don't walk down it, while hell has no door yet you insist on charging in. Today, you will die in here, and there's no one to blame but yourself for overestimating your capabilities and delivering yourself to my door. H, you're just an insignificant and useless person on Qi refining stage, and yet you unexpectedly attempted to snatch away Zijin Palace's inheritance from me. Death is the only repayment you deserve. With that, Feng Lianying raised her sword, and unhurriedly moved towards Hushi. The edge of her sword approaching Hushi's flawless face little by little. This is the face that made her, Feng Lianying, feel both loathing and jealousy. If she destroyed it, she wondered if Brother Yu would treat him differently. Chapter 226. Raging blue ice flames. Did you rely on this face to seduce Brother Yu? Hey, what type of dignified man uses his appearance to serve people? You're really shameless. Since you have no sense of shame, then I'll destroy this face first, and then when you die, I'll let everyone know how despicable you are. The powerful sword edge was just about to touch Hushi's face, however Hushi was completely oblivious to what was happening around her. She was too busy enduring the sharp torture necessary to receive the inheritance in the void. Hiding in the hem of Hushi's skirt, Dandan's eyes turned red blood and he was so angry that he was about to rush out and beat that hateful woman to death. The little golden dragon covered Dandan's mouth and whispered quietly in his ear, "Don't worry, watch me." The next moment, all of Zijin Palace abruptly started to quake slightly, and following that, a low and imposing voice slowly said, "It is forbidden to fight inside Zijin Palace. Those who dare violate this law shall be banished from the palace, and will never be allowed to enter again." Feng Lianying's sword was just about to hit Hushi, but it suddenly halted in mid-air, and turning pale with fright she withdrew her sword and started looking all around. The palace was still the size of about 100 square meters, there wasn't the trace of a person's shadow, and it didn't seem like anything was odd. With bewilderment plastered across her face, she thought about her perfect preparations for visiting the secret territory. Her master had practically told her everything she needed to take note of in Zijin Palace, and of course that included how to pass through every spirit treasure restriction. Yet even with all that, he didn't mention that you couldn't fight in Zijin Palace. Master had even said that in order to prevent someone from entering Zijin Palace and snatching the inheritance, he had specially prepared a powerful spirit weapon that was guaranteed to be foolproof. However, why now did Zijin Palace warn her that fighting was prohibited? The little golden dragon's purple-gold eyes widened in nervousness as he peeked out from under Hush's clothes, his scales sticking up all over his small body. The woman before his eyes was merely a minor gold core stage martial artist. If it was the him of the past, then with just a simple slap, she would have been annihilated into a puff of smoke. However, his seal had only just been removed, so he was still in the form of a young dragon. He was currently unable to defeat Hushi, let alone a gold core stage martial artist. Therefore, he could only mimic his original master's tone to scare her into retreating, and hope that she didn't dare act rashly. If that still didn't make this woman stop, then he couldn't do anything about it anymore, he could only abandon the little pink pig and flee. Luckily, Feng Lianying's eyes flashed, and eventually, she unwillingly glanced at Hushi with ruthlessness flashing in her eyes. Your life may be great, But your luck, it won't be so good every time. Now for her, the most important thing is the inheritance of Zijin Palace. It was for this reason that they, the Liu Li sect, had paid a great price. Only then had they been able to be well prepared. They absolutely wouldn't allow any mistakes. As for this stinky boy, with his cultivation base at just chi refining stage, he wouldn't be able to cause any trouble, and anyway, there will be more opportunities to kill him in the future. Thinking until here, Feng Lianying withdrew her long sword and fished out a jade box from within her sleeve. When she opened the jade box, the wisp of an ice blue-colored flame sprang out from the jade box, before it then fluttered in the air and fell into the furnace. This ice blue flame was a 5th-level raging blue ice flame that her master had found after searching everywhere for it. Once it was found after searching through many treasures, it was given to her to help her with refining. Unfortunately, her current cultivation base rank wasn't high enough, so therefore she was unable to subdue the fire within her body. As soon as the ice blue-colored flame entered Zijin furnace, it slowly burned within the furnace wall. Feng Lianying had thought that as soon as her raging blue ice flame entered the furnace, that it would absorb Hushi's low-grade spiritual fire, and then at that time she wouldn't have to move her hands, as Zijin Palace would judge Hushi's trial as a failure and she would die. However, contrary to Feng Lianying's expectations, once her raging blue ice flame encountered the light golden-colored flame that had already been in the furnace, it unexpectedly dulled in an instant. Chapter 227. The pain of burning heart and forged body. Although the flame wasn't extinguished, the ice blue-colored flame was obviously shrinking. It seemed to be dodging the light gold-colored flame as it cowered to the side and didn't dare approach. Shock was written across Feng Lianying's face, and following that, her gaze became twisted and rage-filled as she stared at Hushi. Her raging blue ice flames were a 5th-level spiritual fire. When it encountered common low-level flames, it would swallow them whole. But this stinky boy's spiritual fire not only didn't become extinguished, it actually subdued her raging blue ice flames. How was this possible? In the end, what was the level of his spiritual fire? And who was it that helped him to subdue such formidable spiritual fire? Don't tell me, was it Brother Yu? That's right, it was definitely Brother Yu. Without Brother Yu's help, how could he, a boy of chi refining stage, have such opportunities and abilities? Thinking of this, an intense murderous desire surged forth in Feng Lianying's heart, and she had an almost irrepressible urge to kill him on the spot. However, at this moment, the raging blue ice flame in the furnace was accepted, and a wisp of grey smoke wafted out, launching into the space between Feng Lianying's eyebrows. Feng Lianying inhaled a few deep breaths, and with great difficulty she was able to suppress the killing intent in her heart. Then, sitting cross-legged on the mat before her, she began to receive the test. Moments after entering the inheritance void, Feng Lianying noticed Hushi sitting cross-legged a certain distance away. Currently, Hushi's forehead was covered with beads of sweat, and her lips trembled slightly. As it was clear that she was withstanding a tremendous amount of pain, her once moist red lips had cracked and lost all color. Like before in this void, the shadowy imprint of Zijin's soul appeared, and informed her about receiving the test. Feng Lianying's face was filled with confidence as she nodded, and soon, the image of Zijin's soul imprint disappeared. At the same time, a portion of ice-cold spiritual power wrapped up her entire body. In the next moment, Feng Lianying's complexion changed greatly as she let out a blood-curdling screech. So painful. It felt like all the bones and meridians in her body were being ripped apart. This kind of pain absolutely wasn't something that normal people could endure. Since childhood she, Feng Lianying, had had everything run smoothly and had always been hailed as a genius. Sought after by everyone, many people had attempted to gain her favor. With all this, how could she now bear this kind of pain? Could it be that that boy called Shi Yu, who was sitting opposite her, had also been enduring this kind of torment? How could this be possible? This type of pain, how could this be called a test? Wasn't this simply asking for a human life? She, a gold core stage martial artist, was unable to endure it, let alone an insignificant chi refining stage martial artist, so how could that brat possibly survive? This loathsome youngster will certainly die in this inheritance void. A corner of Feng Lianying's mouth lifted into a wicked smile, and from her pocket she fished out a medicinal pill and stuffed it into her mouth. Soon, the pain all over her body faded away without a trace, and Feng Lianying's face was full of pride as she lightly laughed. Fortunately, Master prepared this earlier. All I need to do is swallow this spirit powder pill, and I won't need to endure the pain of burning heart and forged body, allowing me to pass this test effortlessly. As for this boy called Shi Yu, since he's just a chi refining stage martial artist, how could he ever hope to survive? Seeing how much he's suffering now, perhaps he won't be able to endure it much longer. At that time, wouldn't the inheritance be hers? Feng Lianying sneered, then, closing her eyes and meditating, she effortlessly prepared to wait for the test to end. At the same time, Hashi was currently experiencing a hell-like boundless pain. Her every meridian, every joint, and even every drop of her blood, seemed to be burning and freezing all at once. On top of that, it felt like countless ants were biting her body, causing her so much agony that she wanted to scream and shout, as well as scratch her own flesh off little by little to ease the pain. However, despite her body being in such terrible pain, from the beginning, in her mind, there had constantly been a part of her that was clear-headed. This part was reminding her, was insisting for her, to become stronger. Chapter 228. Becoming stronger again. She didn't want to return to the days when she was taken advantage of and humiliated. She didn't want to lose her freedom and become a puppet. She desired a part of the world she could call her own, so no one would dare look down on her and humiliate her. She wanted to possess a supreme power that would help her to protect the people who were important to her, and the strength to punish those who would injure her and those she cared about. For such a purpose, she was willing to endure all kinds of suffering torment. As long as she could become stronger by tolerating any kind of suffering in exchange, she wouldn't give in. A violent surge of spiritual power washed over her body and kept flowing all the way through, ultimately gathering in her dantian. Then, her originally vast dantian, at this moment gradually became larger as a tiny whirlpool formed. Hashi's whole body began to slowly emit a multicolored light. On the outside of the inheritance void, the imprint of Zijin's master was leisurely watching the two people who were in the middle of being tested. When he saw Feng Lianying pull out the spirit powder pill and swallow it, a corner of his mouth couldn't help but lift into a sneer. Such a mighty gold core stage martial artist can't actually bear such a test of willpower, while on the contrary, that little girl of foundation establishment stage is better. She clearly isn't aware that this test, although painful, is the best place for gold core stage martial artists to cultivate. TSK. She really doesn't know how to use things to the best of her advantage. After that his gaze turned to look at Hashi, his brows slightly wrinkling. This little girl's state and willpower is really formidable, it's enough to easily intimidate people. Yet after all, she's only a foundation establishment stage martial artist. I'm afraid that for her to pass this test is, perhaps. Suddenly, the imprint of Zijin's master's voice halted, his face a mask of shock. This little girl, what is she doing? In the inheritance void, the multicolored lights from Hashi's body became brighter and brighter, while a tiny vortex began to appear in her dantian. As the vortex spun, the spiritual energy in the inheritance void began to frantically enter Hashi's body. Along with the spiritual energy, her meridians that had barely been tolerating the pain of burning heart and forged body slowly started to restore and become even tougher. Was that even possible? The imprint of Zijin's master exclaimed lightly, and following this, his face broke into a delighted smile. Perhaps, just maybe, this little girl could really create a miracle. In the inheritance void, following the spiritual energy entering Hashi's body, Hashi could feel the pain in her body slowly beginning to decrease and her cultivation base starting to advance once more. Slowly, she went from the middle of foundation establishment stage, advancing to the peak of foundation establishment stage. Moreover, she could feel that after going through this process of burning heart and forged body, her meridians and dantian had become much stronger than before. On top of that, the impurities that had been accumulating because of absorbing too much spiritual energy from foreign sources had also disappeared without a trace. She, Hashi, had become stronger once more. Suddenly, she heard a familiar deep and quiet voice in her ears. Congratulations, together the both of you have passed the test of burning heart and forged body. Hashi was surprised, and as she opened her eyes, It was to see the scenery before her eyes starting to blur. When she could focus once again, she was startled to find that she now appeared in a refined, simple, and unadorned room. Sitting on an armchair near the front of the room there was a young man with a graceful mien. He was none other than the imprint of Zijine's master who had been speaking in the inheritance void a moment ago. Standing beside Hushi there was a woman dressed in white, and as soon as Hushi saw her, she frowned slightly. Feng Lianying. So she even entered Zijin Palace too. When Feng Lianying noticed Hushi standing undamaged in front of her, she almost crushed her own teeth due to hatred. This stinky boy, obviously his cultivation base was as low as an ant's, so how could he be so lucky every time? He was even able to survive the pain of burning heart and forged body. Chapter 229. Avoid choking. A trace of killing intent flashed in Feng Lianying's eyes, but quickly disappeared and was replaced by a gentle smile on her face. Young Master Shi, this is such a coincidence, I didn't expect to see you in here. I wonder how young Master Shi was able to find Zijin Palace. Without any expression on her face, Hashi indifferently said, naturally I have my ways, what does it concern you? Feng Lianying grit her teeth, and she released a soft laugh from her mouth. However, I heard that if it isn't a martial artist of gold core stage or higher that enters the internal core of the secret territory, that they will be torn into pieces. For you to be able to come here, you must have a great ability. Hush's eyes showed a trace of impatience. However, the Ice Lotus Fairy entered, that was how I entered too. Feng Lianying rolled her eyes, her expression somewhat bashful as she said, it was Brother Yu who helped me to enter. He started planning this many years ago while waiting for the secret territory to open so we could hunt for treasures. Besides finding the divine treasures he desired, the most important thing he wanted was for me to enter Zijin Palace and receive the inheritance. After saying that she suddenly paused, then said in a slightly surprised tone, young Master Shi, you didn't know about Brother Yu wanting to enter the secret territory? He didn't inform you that we were coming here together? Hush's lips flattened, her eyes appearing slightly chilly. Feng Lianying saw the change in his expression, and realizing that it wasn't really Nangongyu who helped him enter, a burst of ecstasy immediately appeared in her eyes. Yet all that was heard from her mouth seemed to be apologies. I'm really sorry young Master Shi, that, when I saw that you and Brother Yu were so close, I assumed that your relationship must be very good. Therefore, I thought that Brother Yu surely would have informed you that we were entering the secret territory together. After all, even if a low-level martial artist can't enter the internal core, with the protection of Brother Yu, an average martial artist would be able to obtain some treasures in the outer layer. It's an opportunity that'll only come once in their lifetime. I really didn't expect that Brother Yu didn't actually have any intention to bring you along. He didn't even tell you that he wanted to come to the secret territory. Anyway, Brother Yu also entered the secret territory, so the two of you could run into each other anytime. Or else you can wait until after I receive the inheritance, then I can ask him for you. Perhaps Brother Yu might be having some difficulties. Don't worry, from childhood until now, Brother Yu has always told me if he has any secrets, I will certainly ask him clearly for you. Feng Lianying's gentle voice was laced with obvious mockery, continuously resounding in Hush's ears and making her heart irritated, while a biting cold spread throughout her body. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile all of a sudden, and her expression as she looked at Feng Lianying morphed into a sneer. Wait until after you receive the inheritance. Ice Lotus Fairy, isn't there something wrong with your brain? Who said that the person who'll ultimately be receiving the inheritance will be you? Moreover, how I came to the secret territory is my business, that has nothing to do with Nangongyu. Even more, it has nothing to do with you. Do I need you to meddle in my business? Feng Lianying's expression suddenly sank, then she sneered, you're merely a foundation establishment stage martial artist, the process of how you got here doesn't matter. However, just because of your luck so far, do you really think that you can compete with me over the inheritance? I advise you, young Master Shi, you should conduct yourself with integrity and not overestimate your capabilities. Hashi laughed quietly, and coming into contact with Feng Lianying's forceful power pressure, she didn't cower in the slightest as she said, whether or not it was luck, we'll know once the inheritance trial has ended. Before you boast, Ice Lotus Fairy, It's best you take it easy so that when your words slap your face you avoid choking on your tongue. You. Feng Lianying was just about to attack, when the imprint of Zijin's master, who had been quiet until now, said, "Though Zijin Palace and my Mohar inheritance will dissipate from this world, along with myself, I never expected that someone would really be able to enter here. Furthermore, it was two people at once." Chapter 230, Relying on One's Own Ability. Hashi and Feng Lianying shivered for a moment, before their gazes then fell on the imprint of Zijin's master's image. After seeing the true appearance of Zijin's master, Hashi's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected that his appearance would be of one so young, or that his whole body would give off the feel of a refined scholar. From what she had heard from the little golden dragon, she had assumed that his master would have been a white-haired old man with a long beard, someone who would look like a sage. Zijin's master slightly raised his left hand as he smiled and said, "Welcome to my nothingness void, here is where my inheritance can be received. Unfortunately, my inheritance can only be given to one person, so to determine who will receive my inheritance, the two of you will have to pass 3 tests." The winner, Zijin's master, was still speaking, yet Feng Lianying hurriedly stepped forward and interrupted by respectfully handing over the jade slip in her hand. "Your Honor, this is the letter that my master wanted me to give you. My master said as long as you read this letter, that you'll understand and know who to choose." As she was handing over the jade slip, Feng Lianying proudly glanced at Hashi. She had total confidence that as long as Zijin's master read this jade slip, that he would certainly give the inheritance to her. However, who would have thought that he didn't bother taking the jade slip, instead laughing, "No need, I know who your master is, yet accepting you based on that old guy's reputation isn't possible. A pity really, since that old guy's reputation isn't small either. With this being the case, I will not choose who due to another's reputation. Both of you will just have to rely on your own abilities." "What?" Feng Lianying paled. How could this? However, she hadn't finished speaking when Zijin's master had already waved his sleeve, and suddenly a ray of light rose from the ground, wrapping around each of the 2 girls. When Hashi recovered her senses, she found herself floating in the air with a distant and familiar voice resounding in her ears, "Sister, I will protect you. I absolutely won't let them hurt you." Hashi's body suddenly started shaking, and following that, she felt like the world was spinning in front her eyes as a white building abruptly appeared before her. That building was the orphanage where she had lived in her past life, and the scene at this time was in the orphanage's toilet. A thin and weak girl and boy were trapped in the toilet while a few people were continuously kicking them. At the same time, a couple of other people were holding dirty mops and brooms, whacking the faces of the 2 children now and then. The boy's frame was thinner than the girl's, but he unwaveringly shielded the girl behind him. No matter how badly he was beaten, he refused to move out of the way. They forced the boy's head into the toilet bowl as they kept punching and kicking him, excitedly yelling, "Beat these 2 freaks to death." Watching the boy starting to suffocate from his head being pressed into the toilet bowl, the girl finally snapped, and an intense burst of energy surged out of her body and struck all the scoundrels bullying them. This resulted in them all falling to the ground in an unconscious heap, half of them seriously injured, the rest of them barely breathing. Hashi was stuck floating in the air as she watched this scene. Stiffly biting her lip, her eyes no longer revealed their usual coldness, they were brimming with anguish and painful memories instead. That little girl was her, and the little boy protecting her with all his might was her biological little brother. After they were sent to the orphanage, because of some extraordinary abilities they had possessed that they were unable to suppress, they were regarded as freaks and often bullied by many of the other children there. At that time, after seeing her brother nearly die before her eyes, the energy within Hashi's body erupted with her fury and shocked the entire orphanage. The scene in front of her changed once again, and as Hashi floated in the air, she watched her little brother go to the dean of the orphanage without her knowing, and admit that the immense energy attack was caused by him. Chapter 231, Memory Maze. Soon after, her little brother was taken away by a group of mysterious people who secretly sent him to an underground laboratory. When she saw this, Hashi's body began to tremble violently, the pain and anger in her chest surging like a tide. As she floated in the air with a blank stare, She watched as her little brother was pushed into the laboratory. Little by little his body was dissected, his limbs snapped and torn, and his skull scooped clean. Afterwards, he was discarded like garbage into a pile of waste. Watching this scene, Hashi felt a fury so destructive that it could destroy heaven and exterminate earth surge up within her, causing her to almost lose her mind and make her wish she could kill all the people in this world. Like a wounded cub, she roared as she charged towards the murderers of her brother in the scene below her feet. However, the scene suddenly changed once again, morphing into the desert prison in ADX. In order to rescue her partner, Lungye, she broke into the prison alone. Yet in exchange for her efforts, Lungye had stabbed a dagger into her chest. Lungye had wanted her for himself, and when he had realized that it wouldn't ever be possible, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could, and felt that it was better to kill her. The organization had taken advantage of her, and when they had felt threatened by her, they had decided to kill her. In her past life she was like a chess piece, constantly being manipulated by fate and other people, with no freedom and no way to protect the people she had truly loved. Would she just accept her fate as a chess piece? No. She wasn't willing at all. In this life she wanted to become stronger than anyone else so no one would be able to hurt her, and no one would be able to manipulate her. Hashi suddenly opened her eyes, and before her was the familiar elegant room and Zijin's master's smiling features. Wiping the perspiration off her forehead, her hand felt cold and clammy. Suddenly, she heard Feng Lianying's taunting voice say, "You couldn't even pass such a simple refined heart spell, but you still wish to compete with me over Zijin Palace's inheritance." Hashi glanced briefly at Feng Lianying and saw her leisurely relaxing, her manner more fitting to someone who hadn't just been completely trapped in a memory maze. Hence Hashi couldn't help but sneer, passing the test by relying on spiritual items and therefore cheating. What qualifications do you have to mock me? You. Feng Lianying's face flushed red, but when she looked at the smiling yet pensive look on the face of Zijin's master, she couldn't help but push down her anger as she didn't dare act rashly. She had indeed depended on the spiritual items given to her by her master, so of course she had effortlessly passed the refined heart spell. But how could this stinky boy know that? Zijin's master laughed slightly and said, "No matter how you did it, congratulations to the both of you on passing the first examination. The result of this test was a tie, and now the second test will begin." Feng Lianying was dissatisfied. Obviously she was the first one to exit the memory maze, so why was the result a tie? Yet, before she had a chance to speak, Zijin's master once again flicked out his sleeve. Soon, dozens of porcelain bottles appeared in front of Hashi and Feng Lianying. Apart from the first porcelain bottle being red, these numerous bottles were all the same with no difference, and all of them were decorated with blue and white stripes. Zijin's master laughed faintly. "While the treasure you want to inherit is my Moha inheritance, the greatest pride in my life was my alchemy technique, and it beats the inheritance due to my somewhat unique healing techniques. Therefore, this second test will be testing your medical expertise. In front of each of you there is a red porcelain bottle. In this red bottle there is a highly poisonous medicinal pill called dense viper orchid. This dense viper orchid was something I refined when I was younger. The person who takes this pill, even if it's a nascent soul stage martial artist, will be poisoned within a quarter of an hour. Once poisoned, your body will be covered with scales, just like a snake's. But these scales don't grow outward, rather, they grow and spread within your body, until they finally erode your heart and dantian. If you're not cured in the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, then even God can't save you." Chapter 232. The greatest pride to depend on. Feng Lianying sucked in a cold breath, and her face turned an extremely ugly shade. She was well aware of how terrible dense viper orchid was, because even her master had mentioned this poison once before. Nevertheless, with a grave face she glanced at Zijin's master, wondering what he intended bringing out this poison. A sharp glint flashed in Zijin's master's eyes, then he continued, "What you have to do is take this dense viper orchid, and before you die due to being poisoned, you have to find dense viper orchid's antidote amongst the remaining 30 bottles of medicinal pills. These 30 bottles of medicinal pills contain nearly the exact same attributes as the real antidote, be it color, scent, or accumulation of spiritual power. Apart from the real antidote, none of them have any effect at all, and in case you take them, they will cause the effects of dense viper orchid to accelerate instead. Therefore, for this test, it's up to either of you to decide whether or not you want to participate, so you should think it over properly yourselves. Hashi took 2 steps forward, and picking up 2 of the small bottles, she opened the stoppers and sniffed. Sure enough, regardless of the shape, color, or scent, there was no difference. Finding dense viper orchid's antidote wasn't difficult. What was difficult was when this kind of extremely poisonous pill was ingested. As the time limit for taking the antidote approached little by little, with frightening scales slowly appearing in the body, how could any ordinary person still stay calm enough to differentiate which was the antidote? Hashi laughed coldly, and without a single hesitation, she picked up the red medicinal pill bottle and swallowed a pill instantly. Zijian's master raised an eyebrow with a look of surprise in his eyes. Hashi's courage really made him, who had already lived a millennium, have no choice but to admire her. The moment the dense viper orchid poison reached Hashi's stomach, a distinct red line started to trace down the veins on her arms. Slowly, this red line got longer, extending itself towards her heart. Hashi's expression sharpened with her concentration, and the speed of her hands suddenly became very fast. In the blink of an eye, all 30 blue and white striped bottles were opened, and all of the medicinal pills were poured onto a tray. Then, suddenly, a silver needle appeared gripped in one of Hashi's hands. Using the silver needle, she inserted it a little into one of the pills that she had just placed into her mouth, and the scent of spiritual herbs wafted into the air. The smell and spiritual energy properties of most medicines were very similar, so even if a common doctor in Mi Luo continent used spiritual power to inspect them, they still might not be able to find the real antidote. But Hashi was different. When she differentiated between medicines, she also examined them using a subtle touch and a sense of taste. Although she had tasted all kinds of herbs as a divine doctor in her past life, with this she had to distinguish the 5 elements between the 30 medicinal pills, so it wasn't like it would take no effort at all. Just 3 brief minutes later, Hashi picked up a medicinal pill, a faint smile showing on her face. Seeing that she was about to stuff the pill into her mouth, Zijian's master couldn't help but say, "You still have a lot of time to examine the rest, so there's no need to be so hasty with deciding. If you swallow the wrong pill, it's very possible that you will immediately die from the poison. Have you thought about it properly?" A glint of confidence flashed in Hashi's eyes, then, without the slightest hesitation, she swallowed the pill. Showing a reckless smile, she said, "I apologize, I always firmly believe in my medical expertise. Even if you've lived 1,000-years-old man, Zijian's master, it's not likely that you'll be able to ever surpass me in medical expertise." This is Hashi's greatest pride that she depended on. As expected, after the medicinal pill entered her stomach, the poison source that had been circling her dantian was instantly neutralized. Zijian's master's face showed disbelief and admiration. His gaze as he looked at Hashi was becoming more and more amiable. Chapter 233. Regardless of life or death, Hashi's gaze indifferently landed upon Feng Lianying. "Ice Lotus Fairy, I've already passed my part of the test. Since it seems that you're reluctant to swallow the medicinal pill, does that mean you're ready to forfeit the inheritance?" "Why would I give up?" Feng Lianying shouted in a frail tone, her whole face flushing a deep red. "Anyway, it's merely differentiating the antidote, that's all. Do you think I'll lose to you?" With that, she poured out a pill from the red bottle. But just as she was going to stuff the pill into her mouth, there was distinct fear in her eyes. This was dense viper orchid. Once it was swallowed, the whole body would be covered with scales, becoming more ugly than a beast's. Hashi saw that Feng Lianying was so scared that her face had turned white, so she couldn't help but shake the empty red bottle held in her hand and leisurely say, "Ice Lotus Fairy, there's no need for you to force yourself. If you don't dare to swallow the pill, then you had better immediately admit defeat." "Who said I don't dare?" Feng Lianying felt her anger surge as she was taunted by Hashi, and without thinking, she swallowed the pill. A red line soon appeared on her fair arm, and like a line of death, it continually spread towards her heart. Feng Lianying's eyes filled with horror, and even her movements of seeking the antidote by opening the white and blue striped bottles became frenzied. This caused the bottles to knock into each other and produce clanking sounds as she searched. As time passed and was about to run out, Feng Lianying still hadn't found the antidote. Arg! I don't want to become ugly. Feng Lianying looked at the skin on the back of her hand, and finally unable to bear it any longer, she collapsed to the ground. Save me. Zijin's master, save me. However, Zijin's master had no intention of saving her, and with the same gentle smile on his face as before, he said, all the tests need to be accomplished by the prospective new owner of the inheritance. Regardless of life or death, it's the responsibility of your own misfortune or good luck, so it's unnecessary for me to save you. Feng Lianying looked at Zijin's master, then looked at Hashi watching indifferently from the side. With a hateful look aimed at the two of them, she grit her teeth till they nearly broke. Eventually, while still clenching her teeth, she fished out a tiny silver-white jade bead that she had kept hidden on her body all this time. Firmly pinching it to crumbs, she then smeared it onto her eyelids. The next moment, Feng Lianying's eyes shined brilliantly, and her weak divine sense suddenly increased. Looking once more at the black pills that she had previously poured out, her eyes soon lit up as she picked up one of them and quickly swallowed it. As soon as the antidote entered her body, the red line and dark patch on her hand disappeared without a trace in a flash. Her dantian that had already started burning quickly restored to its original state, the poison finally cured. Zijin's master laughed faintly, then stood up to say, "Congratulations to the both of you, you both passed the second test once again. However, again, the outcome isn't decided on who will be able to receive the inheritance, so we can only proceed to the third test to see the result." When Hashi heard that, her expression was only indifference. Feng Lianying, on the other hand, tightly massaged her arms, her eyes lowered. During the test a moment ago, she had used the precious bright sense bead that her master had given her. Unfortunately, the bright sense bead was a single-use only item. When it was used against an enemy, it could increase her divine sense to limitless possibilities, increasing her speed and 5 senses. It was a very formidable weapon that could save one's life, but today, she had unexpectedly used it in such a place. Moreover, just because she was too late in detoxifying the poison, while most of the scales on her skin had disappeared, she now had a black mark remaining on her left arm. Feng Lianying had always been beautiful, yet now she had such an ugly mark on her flawless left wrist. How could she be willing to accept this? Chapter 234, Life Spirit Beast Qing Shuo Shi Yu. All of this was caused by that bastard, Shi Yu. Just wait until she received the inheritance. When she departed Zijin Palace, she would definitely dismember his body into pieces. Zijin's master was in high spirits as he observed the reaction of the two people. Then slightly flinging out his sleeve, the scene before their eyes immediately changed. Suddenly, they appeared in an expansive garden, and crouching in the middle of the garden there was a huge ferocious beast the size of a small hill. This ferocious beast's physique was somewhat similar to a bear's, but its face resembled a dog's. At this moment, it was half lying on the ground, appearing a bit comical. When Zijin's master saw this ferocious beast, his face became gentle and he walked up to the ferocious beast. Reaching out his hand, he stroked its fur as he said, "This is a life spirit beast that I subdued in Mi Luo continent when I was younger, Qing Shuo. He is also one of my most important companions. Your third test is to make Qing Shuo acknowledge you. Whoever can gain Qing Shuo's approval can become the owner of Zijin Palace." As if responding to Zijin's master's words, Qing Shuo quickly poked Zijin's master with its big head, acting all coquettish and clingy. Standing on the side, Feng Lianying's gloomy face finally revealed a smile. Taking a step forward with confidence, she laughed gracefully before asking, "Zijin's master, this time can you let me try first?" Zijin's master nodded. "You may." Feng Lianying leisurely moved forward, and as she passed beside Hashi, her steps suddenly halted, the corner of her mouth lifting into a strange smile. "May I ask Zijin's master, if I'm able to tame this spirit beast, doesn't that mean that I would immediately become the inheritor of the inheritance?" Zijin's master was slightly startled for a moment, a glint of light flashing across his eyes. He then smiled as he nodded. Exactly. Ching Sho will only recognize one master, so no matter who gets the recognition of Ching Sho, that person will receive the inheritance. After hearing that, the smile on Feng Lianying's face immediately became brilliant and proud. Then, she turned to Hashi and faintly said, "Young Master Shi, it wasn't easy for you to come here, but unfortunately, the conclusion will disappoint you. I will certainly become the inheritor of Zijin Palace. After all, Brother Yu is still eagerly awaiting my good news." After that, without waiting for Hashi to respond, Feng Lianying's figure flashed as she floated like a fairy and landed in front of the spirit beast, Ching Sho. Feng Lianying wasn't acting blindly, she had genuine confidence in herself. Her reputation in Mi Luo continent as the young clan head of the Liu Li sect, with the title of Ice Lotus Fairy and mid-level member of the Doctor Association, had spread far and wide. But few people knew that she, Feng Lianying, was also a master beast tamer. Relying on her own strength, she had already formed contracts with 3 spirit beasts, all of them quite highly ranked. Being presented with this third test, it was just like it was custom-made for herself. What reason would there be for her to not win? Feng Lianying faintly laughed, and slightly lifting her still spotlessly fair wrist, an exquisite little silver bell soon appeared in front of her. As her delicate hand gently swung the little bell, a melodious and beautiful tinkling sound could be heard. Seeing this bell, Zijin's master couldn't help but look up with the hint of an interested smile. The yin and yang bell, that's rather interesting. That old man really gave any spiritual item to his treasured disciple. The bell's ringing didn't cause any reaction at first, but after a while, Ching Sho's eyes lost their focus and became somewhat vague. Seeing this happen, Feng Lianying was overjoyed and swayed the little bell in her hand faster. As the tempo became faster and more coherent, the bell tones came together and formed a slightly queer melody. Chapter 235. The risk of being bitten back. As Hashi watched, Ching Sho's eyes slowly changed from being unable to focus, to lifeless and dull. Then, with involuntary movements, it step by step walked towards the direction of Feng Lianying. Watching the unfocused and uncontrolled state of Ching Sho, Hashi's eyebrows creased. If she hadn't guessed wrongly, Feng Lianying was using an enchantment technique. Moreover, if this technique was used on a low-level spirit beast, it would damage the spirit beast's divine sense, resulting in it becoming a puppet that had no choice but to obey all orders. It could be said that spirit beasts that had been tamed this way hadn't properly made a contract with their master, and instead, they were just a mere tool being controlled. As Ching Sho's eyes continued to lose their focus, it had slowly walked in front of Feng Lianying, following her order of crawling on the ground. A glint of excitement flashed in Feng Lianying's eyes, and her hand continuously shook the bell. Gently extending her other hand, she placed it on top of Ching Sho's head, slowly releasing her new level of spiritual power and wrapping it around its head. Not a moment later, Ching Sho's eyes slowly started to focus, but it had become very meek, as if it was only a house dog crouching before Feng Lianying. Successfully tamed. Feng Lianying was no longer able to suppress the proud look on her face. As she stopped shaking the bell in her hand, she took a step forward, towards Zijin's master, and bowed. Zijin's master, luckily I didn't fail to accomplish this test. I've tamed Ching Sho. However, there was no change to the expression on the face of Zijin's master, except for a corner of his mouth lifting into a meaningful smile. Oh, are you sure? Feng Lianying stared blankly for a moment, and just as she was about to ask him what his words meant, her complexion suddenly changed. Ching Sho, who had up until this moment been completely meek, abruptly released a snarl, a burst of formidable spiritual pressure exploding from its entire body. This kind of spiritual pressure far surpassed what a gold core stage martial artist could take, and Feng Lianying was caught completely off guard, directly struck by that spiritual pressure. Combining this with the effort she had used for the enchantment technique, and she was too powerless and ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood, before her entire body then fell weakly to the ground. Raising her head, she looked at Ching Sho, who had snarled at her in disbelief, murmuring, "How could this be possible? My method for taming beasts, how could it fail?" A glint of ridicule flashed within the eyes of Zijin's master as he replied, Oh, I forgot to warn you too, being threatened and forced are the things that my Ching Sho loathes the most. You have to make him want to recognize you. For example, you have to make him willing to do it. Otherwise, you have to bear the risk of being bitten back. After hearing that, Feng Lianying's complexion paled further, her heart brimming with unwillingness and resentment since she had failed the final test. However, just thinking that if she couldn't do it, then it would be near impossible for that stinky boy to accomplish it. With that thought in her mind, her heart felt a little better. As long as he couldn't do it, then the result would be a draw and she would still have a chance. She was determined to win Zijin Palace's inheritance. After Zijin's master finished warning the two of them, he looked at the current ferocious appearance of his spirit beast, and couldn't help but shake his head. Ching Sho is now in a bad mood, its temperament will be more violent than usual. I'm afraid that if you still want to tame it, that it will be extremely difficult. Hashi crossed her arms as she examined this huge spirit beast growling angrily, pondering how she was going to make it submit to her. She was different to the martial artists of this world, as in regards to spirit beasts, her concept of them from the beginning was limited to her adorable Dandan and that smelly little golden dragon. As for how to subdue ordinary spirit beasts, she really had no idea at all. However, seeing this spirit beast with a head like a dog and a body similar of that to a bear's, Hashi suddenly remembered the wild animals of her past life. How would she have gotten a wild animal to be obedient back then? At least, obedient in the shortest amount of time? After thinking about it for a while, Hashi's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, she slowly strode towards Ching Sho, but when Ching Sho saw someone approaching it, it suddenly raised its body up from its crouched position. With its mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl, it released a warning snarl, as if in the next moment it would swallow Hashi whole. Chapter 236. Gluttonous nature. With such a scene before her, Hashi wasn't afraid in the slightest. Instead, she extended her hand to lightly touch the tip of Ching Sho's tongue as it poked out from its huge mouth. In the next moment, the thing that made Feng Lianying and Zijin's master stupefied occurred. The spirit beast that had been looking like a monster with bared fangs suddenly quieted down. It even smacked its lips while revealing an expression of joy. Zijin's master was stunned, yet when he saw something sparkling flash within Hush's palm, he chuckled wryly. So, it was like that. That girl unexpectedly used that method to tame his Ching Sho. That girl was simply too clever. Now that the fierce and terrifying looks Ching Sho had been making a moment ago were no more, it was currently behaving like a real pet dog, incessantly rubbing against Hashi with eager and expectant expressions. Then, Hashi turned her wrist, and soon a piece of cake dropped onto her palm, the cake emitting rich spiritual energy along with a sweet smell. This wasn't just an ordinary piece of cake, but rather, she had produced this cake after mixing in a small amount of spirit water and basing it on the cheesecake recipes from her past life. She had known that the spirit beasts of this world had preferences similar to that of humans, and furthermore, that many spirit beasts liked honey desserts. Although she didn't know how to tame spirit beasts, she did know that it was common to have a gluttonous nature in this world. Without mentioning spirit beasts, even intellectual people like Nangong Yu found the deliciousness of the superb cake on Hush's hand hard to resist. Everyone watching fell into an unspeakable silence. So when Feng Lianying saw Ching Sho rubbing against Hushi with its big head, she couldn't believe her eyes. She had relied on her skills as a master beast tamer, and the secret treasure, the yin and yang bell given to her by her master, to help her. Unfortunately, even she was unable to tame the spirit beast. Yet to her surprise, under this stinky boy, Shiyu's hands, it had become so obedient. How could this be possible? That brat must have used some shameful method and cheated. That must be it. Zijin's master quickly recovered, then faintly laughed before he said, "The outcome of the third test has been decided. Little boy, I congratulate you on receiving my Moha inheritance." A corner of Hush's mouth curled up into a meaningful smile, but before she even had time to speak, Feng Lianying started screaming out of control. "This is impossible. I don't believe that he was able to tame Ching Sho. Even I, a gold core stage master beast tamer, was unable to subdue that ferocious beast. so how could he, mere trash on chi refining stage, have been able to subdue it? I'm sure he must have used some sort of shameful trick. Zijian's master, you're a wise person, so by all means you shouldn't be deceived by him. A trace of contempt rapidly flashed within the eyes of Zijian's master, but the expression on his face didn't change in the slightest as he indifferently said, during this third test, the one who relied on their own ability, and the one who cheated, I indeed saw it all clearly. When you used a spirit powder pill to avoid feeling the pain of burning heart and forged body, I didn't interfere and allowed you to pass. Do you really think that I knew nothing about your little tricks? That's different. Feng Lianying shouted quietly, but then the complexion on her face darkened into an ugly shade of red. What Zijian's master said wasn't wrong. If she could use small tricks to pass the tests, then why couldn't that stinky boy? She had cheated her way through all of the tests, so what qualifications did she have to accuse him? But, for the purpose of obtaining this inheritance, how many years had they, the Liu Li sect, been preparing? How much of their strength and their resources had they spent? Even her master had given her precious treasures over, even though she normally guarded them carefully. And when she had done so, she had repeatedly told Feng Lianying that she must receive the inheritance. Chapter 237, Spiritual Sense. Now, with such an outcome, how could she be willing to accept it? Feng Lianying grit her teeth, and after aiming a look of resentment towards Hushi, she then turned her gloomy and cold gaze towards Zijian's master. Zijian's master, are you really disregarding the old kindness of my family head, and giving Zijian Palace's inheritance to this stinky brat? Don't forget, his cultivation base is merely on chi refining stage, and moreover, he is insupportable and has no foundations. Plus, he has no family background, so when the time comes that people under heaven know about the matter of him receiving the inheritance, he might even be unable to keep his small life. Zijian's master, aren't you worried that your inheritance might cease to exist in his hands? Not waiting for Zijian's master to reply, Feng Lianying raised her chin in arrogance and continued, but with my Liu Li sect it's different. If the inheritance is in my hands, I can ensure I'll make the best use of it. With the power and influence of my Liu Li sect, who in this land would dare to covet it? On top of this, my family head will owe you a big favor as well. Such a result has many advantages, without disadvantages, for Zijian's master. Hence, Zijian's master, you really won't consider it once again? Finished saying these words, Feng Lianying's confidence was brimming. She believed that as long as people had a brain, they would know how to choose. This stinky brat Shi Yu's cultivation base was low, he had a lowly status, and except for his good luck in passing the 3 rounds of assessments, what else did he have? However, contrary to what Feng Lianying expected, after Zijian's master heard her speech, a glint of coldness flashed within his eyes as sharp as a blade. Then suddenly, a burst of icy cold power pressure erupted from his body. It seems that I've forgotten to tell you, I'm the same as Qing Shuo, and one of the things I loathe the most is when other people threaten me. Your skills are inferior, you lost the competition, and in spite of everything, you still dare to talk nonsense in here. You're overestimating your capabilities. Considering your master's face, I'll spare your life today, but right now, I want you to immediately leave this inheritance void. Don't let me see you again. His words had barely fallen when Feng Lianying felt a sharp pain throughout her entire body, and in the blink of an eye, she sank into darkness. Feng Lianying's figure gradually dissipated, leaving only Hushi and Zijian's master in the inheritance void. The body of Zijian's master then slowly floated upwards in the void, his deep and low voice resonating as if it was being projected from the horizon. Little girl, are you ready to receive the inheritance? Hushi nodded, her expression showing rare respectfulness. Many thanks to Senior for bestowing such a generous gift. The face of Zijian's master showed the traces of a satisfied smile, and the next moment, he and Qing Shuo's figures suddenly exploded into blinding white lights. The white lights scattered in all directions, the sight resembling fireworks blooming from afar. Then, these lights rapidly shot towards Hushi, drilling into her mind and body. Hushi uttered a muffled groan as she felt a strange energy incessantly surging and circulating within her body, which then slowly converged around her dantian. And in her mind an avalanche of information began to appear, along with the words from Zijian's master. Little girl, in this secret territory, Qing Shuo and I were only the remaining wisps of spiritual sense. And only by obtaining a spiritual sense, are you then able to open the divine key and practice the methods of my Zijin technique, the Moha inheritance, to your heart's content. After you've completed the acceptance of the inheritance, Zijin Palace will disappear, and you will become the new owner of this secret territory. However, if you genuinely want to control the secret territory, you still need to do a lot of things. Hush's brows creased. Zijin's master had said that she would become the new owner of the secret territory, but he didn't actually say how she would control the secret territory, right? Does this mean that she would have to explore the entire secret territory? Currently, the secret territory was crawling with gold core stage and above martial artists. Moreover, there were many dangerous places with layer upon layer of protection, causing Hashi to feel her scalp become numb. If she wanted to explore the secret territory with her current strength, it would be even harder than reaching the sky. How would she explain this to everyone in the Liu Li sect, and even more, explain it to her master? Feng Lian Ying raised her head. Seeing Hashi sitting cross-legged in meditation in front of her, an intense jealousy and murderous rage suddenly lit up within her eyes. Abruptly standing up, she then pulled out her long sword and engulfed it in a blazing flame. All of this was because of that bastard. He had brought trouble to her by causing her to lose the inheritance, which would result in her losing face when she returned to her sect. Today, even if she had to risk being banished from the secret territory by Zijin's master, she must kill this wretched boy. The sword lit up, and like lightning, it shot forth towards the clueless and unaware figure of Hashi. She had thought that this lad's body would be stabbed by the sword, and furthermore, he would be burnt to ashes by the flame. However, the blood-splattering display that she had expected to see didn't actually happen, and instead, Feng Lianying heard a bang, and her long sword was unexpectedly blocked by a golden barrier. Feng Lianying was startled, and soon heard the rage-filled voice of Zijin's master say, "I told you before, it's forbidden to use violence within Zijin Palace. Why are you still here? Quickly get lost, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Zijin Palace started shaking following the command of Zijin's master, seeming to express his wrath. Feng Lianying's hand holding the sword couldn't help but tremble, while her face revealed the mixed emotions of unwillingness, jealousy, anger, and resentment. This made her previously beautiful face become twisted with a sort of sinister maliciousness. Chapter 239, You Cannot Harm My Mother. Under Hush's clothes, the little golden dragon was a bundle of nerves as he stealthily watched Feng Lianying's reactions. At the same time, he was also trying to appease Dandan and pushing away his small claws. Even though she was clearly unwilling, they watched as Feng Lianying carried her sword with her as she walked out of Zijin Palace, causing the little golden dragon to finally heave a long sigh of relief. Then, turning towards Dandan with a proud smile, his mouth noisily opened and closed as he said, "See, I told you that I could handle that evil woman." However, the little golden dragon had yet to finish speaking, when Dandan suddenly cried out in alarm, and his pale pink body abruptly swelled as blinding lights burst from his body. The next moment, a bang echoed throughout the room, and the two little spirit pets flew out from under Hush's clothes to land heavily fell upon the ground. Dandan uttered a painful wail and his swollen body deflated at a speed faster than the naked eye could follow, becoming smaller and smaller. His pig appearance seemed to have lost all moisture, and his soft skin was no longer as shiny and smooth as before. Rather, it was now all wrinkled, as if completely dried out. "Dandan, are you okay?" The little golden dragon cried out in fear, shock and terror clearly written across his face. This foolish little pig, in order to protect him. I had thought that it was truly an order from Zijin's master, yet as it turns out, it was only two cunning little beasts. I was almost deceived by the two of you. When the little golden dragon heard that, he raised his small head and furiously said, "My master has already begun the process of receiving the inheritance of Zijin Palace, which means that he will soon become the owner of this secret territory. the younger family member of Zijin's master. If you dare harm my master, be careful because Zijin's master will definitely seek you out to pay back your debt. Upon hearing that, Feng Lianying burst into a fit of laughter. Since you said that the acceptance has just began, then that means it's not yet complete. If I kill him now, he's not a descendant of Zijin's master, so naturally no one will take revenge on behalf of him. What's more, can it be that you really think my Liu Li sect is afraid of Zijin's master? After saying that, the look on her face suddenly became fierce and she gloomily said, if I can't receive the inheritance, then I won't let others receive it either. With that remark, her figure flashed as she charged straight towards Hushi cloaked in an intense murderous aura. Mother! Dandan cried out loudly, and without thinking, his figure once again swelled as he pounced over before Hushi. You cannot harm my mother. The power of a gold core stage martial artist sword was very formidable, and Dandan was merely a newborn primary spirit. How could he withstand it? When the sword pierced his body, Dandan let out a shrill scream, and in a flash he fell into Hush's arms as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His previous pink skin was now nearly completely covered in wrinkles and lifelessly dull. It was as if he would shatter into a million pieces at any time. But the next moment, Dandan shockingly grew even larger to protect Hushi. His voice was brimming with fear and tears, but it also carried stubbornness and the strong conviction of one prepared to sacrifice their life for their beliefs as he said, You cannot harm my mother. Mother, don't be afraid, Dandan will certainly protect you. Feng Lianying withdrew her long sword, and as her towering figure looked down at the little pig who was firmly protecting Hushi, she sneered in contempt, based on what abilities do you want to block me? Such nonsense. Well, since you're so anxious to court death, then I shall kill you, and your master. Little foolish pig, are you insane? Hurry up and run away. She's a gold core stage martial artist, how could you be her opponent? If you continue like this you'll die. Dandan firmly shook his head, stubbornness and persistence showing on his face. Mother is the best mother in this world. Dandan will absolutely not abandon mother to run away. If you're afraid, then you can go. In a flash, the fireball transformed into several sharp arrows, all of them heading towards Hushi, Dandan, and the little golden dragon. We can't let her hurt mother. Dandan shouted loudly, immediately making his body swell large again to protect Hushi. The little golden dragon's complexion paled. He was more knowledgeable than Dandan, and therefore he knew just how terrible one strike from a gold core martial artist was. However, when he looked at the foolish pig behind him, completely disregarding his own life, the little golden dragon clenched his teeth and the golden light surrounding his body suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering noise was heard that caused Zijin Palace to shake, as if a major disaster had befallen them all. After the sound of the explosion quieted down, the little golden dragon fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood as he slowly started to faint. At this moment, a large area of his dragon scales were burnt, the horns on top of his head were broken, and his entire body was covered with blood and ghastly wounds. The little amount of energy that he had previously managed to collect with great difficulty after becoming unsealed, was now completely used up. Dandan started crying after seeing such a miserable appearance, and his body rapidly shrunk back to normal size as he went to the little golden dragon's side. Long Long, are you all right? Weya, don't die. Little foolish pig. The little golden dragon spat out another mouthful of blood and foam, baring his teeth as he said, Don't you know who I am? How can I die so easily? He was unable to finish what he was saying before he fainted, the golden light around his body fading without a trace. Chapter 241. The shopkeeper of Shengde Hall Feng Lianying sneered, You're a young dragon that's not much better than a snake. Even the low-level disciples of my Liu Li sect might be able to catch you as a pet, and yet here you are, daring to be so arrogant in front of me. Don't overestimate your capabilities and attempt something impossible. As far as a useless spirit pet goes, you're the most useless. Since you were so devoted in protecting him, then I'll help you all die together. Upon saying that, Her long sword suddenly lit up with a blinding red light and was surrounded by leaping flames, as if it was about to burn all of Zijin Palace down. Fear and sadness clearly showed on Dandan's face. But, in the next moment, he resolutely clenched his jaw and leaped into the air, firmly wrapping himself around Hushi. He had experienced thousands of years of waiting in loneliness, before he had finally managed to meet Mother. Mother was so gentle, so kind, she made so many delicious types of food for him, and she would even hug him to appease him. If he lost Mother, then would he have to return to that boundless darkness, where there was no longer any food, no light, and no more of Mother's hugs to warm him? No. He didn't want that to happen. As long as he could be together with Mother, even if he had to pay any price, he would do it without any hesitation. Dandan's body grew bigger and bigger, and the spiritual power in his body started surging violently, forming into a faint spiritual power vortex. Next, the long sword enveloped in blazing flames issued an ear-piercing buzzing as it was aimed straight at the two spirit pets. Dandan's eyes filled with determination, and he recklessly launched the spiritual vortex. But suddenly, a refreshing screen of water appeared before their eyes. During a moment of life or death, it had unexpectedly blocked that whizzing long sword and its blazing flames. Feng Lianying's complexion became extremely unsightly, and she asked in a dark voice, "Who is it? Come out here now." Her words had barely fallen when the door of Zijin Palace was slowly pushed open, and a man dressed in a black robe entered the palace holding a wooden protection tablet in his outstretched hands. The man's looks were scholarly and ordinary, while his voice when speaking carried a refined and amiable tone. "Ice Lotus Fairy, your reputation is well known, and your Liu Li sect is a dignified and large sect. By taking advantage of such a precarious position and mounting an attack on a member of the younger generation, it wouldn't be good if it were to spread outside, right?" When she clearly saw the man's face, Feng Lianying's expression showed a hint of disgust in a flash. "I was wondering who was it, and as it turns out, it's actually shopkeeper Ju of Shengde Hall. You're merely trash who depended on medicinal pills to forcefully accumulate enough spiritual power to reach gold core stage, and yet you dare to meddle in this fairy's business. Just who do you think you are?" The person who had come was Ju Yangan, a second-ranked doctor and shopkeeper of Shengde Hall that Hushi became acquainted with when she was rescuing Xiao Li's brother. Ju Yangan quickly walked over to stand before Hushi, and Zijin Palace's doors slowly shut behind him. Inhaling a deep breath, he said, "The people in this world have a duty to meddle in affairs that have nothing to do with them if someone is about to be hurt. Furthermore, this is young Master Shi, who this humble one happens to be acquainted with. Hence, no matter what, this humble one can't just sit back and watch him die by your hands." Feng Lianying's words were laced with contempt as she sneered, "If those words were said to me by your master, Jiu Liu Feng, I might have shown some fear, but since it was you, you have no qualifications to talk to me like that." Finished speaking, Feng Lianying brandished the long sword in her hand once more, and ruthlessly shot towards Ju Yangan. With a bang, a water mist rose into the air and blocked Feng Lianying's strike. However, this time the water barrier vibrated extremely hard, like it was only just managing to withstand the attack and resist shattering into pieces. Feng Lianying retrieved the long sword, and seeing the wooden protection tablet still in Ju Yangan's hands emitting a faint silvery light, she sneered, "You think that such a lousy protection tablet could block my attack? Dream on." Chapter 242, unable to contend like she had thought of something, Feng Lianying's jealous-filled gaze swept over towards Hushi and she gloomily said, "Since shopkeeper Ju came here, it was presumably to also receive the inheritance of Zijin Palace, right? However, this palace has now been taken away by that stinky boy using his despicable methods. Shopkeeper Ju, didn't you want to get the inheritance?" Upon hearing this, shopkeeper Ju stared blankly, before then glancing in disbelief at the boy meditating with his eyes closed. Young master once said that if one wants to receive Zijin Palace's inheritance, that they must at least be a martial artist of gold core stage or higher, and moreover, they need to have a certain level of medical expertise. Young Master Shi's cultivation base was clearly just Qi refining stage, but unexpectedly he was able to get the inheritance. Could it be that his medical expertise is really so high that it's reached perfection? When Dandan heard Feng Lianying slandering Hashi, he angrily shouted, "Evil woman who won't ever be able to be married off, it was obviously because your skills weren't as good as Mother's that you lost, and Zijin's master even said that you were inferior to Mother. With your venomous heart you were jealous of Mother, and thus you wanted to take advantage and kill her when she's in the process of receiving the inheritance. Such a vile person. Shameful and malicious people like you will absolutely not have a good ending." Zhu Yangan was baffled. Young master, she was a man, yet his spirit pet called him mother. At the same time, Feng Lianying on the opposite side was angered so much that she trembled all over. As she glared at Dandan and Hashi, it was clear that she wanted to mince them up into meat patties. "Zhu Yangan, you better get out of here if you know what's good for you, or else I will kill you together with them." As her words fell, a formidable and imposing spiritual pressure burst out from Feng Lianying's body, tightly wrapping itself around Zhu Yangan and Dandan. Zhu Yangan instantly turned deathly pale, causing him to fall back a step. The light of the wooden protection tablet in his hand seemed to dim slightly. His eyes expressed his dread and panic. It's precisely as the Ice Lotus Fairy had said. He had depended on medicinal pills given to him by his young master to help him forcibly accumulate enough spiritual power to raise his cultivation base to gold core stage. And it was all done for the purpose of entering the secret territory and obtaining Zijin Palace's inheritance. His strength simply wouldn't be able to contend with the woman's before his eyes, so the wisest choice was to leave. However, Zhu Yangan turned his head back and caught a glimpse of Hashi. The youngster's long eyelashes were resting gently on soft, round cheeks, while his exquisite skin was sparkling and translucent. It was like this person was carved out of white jade, exceptionally beautiful and delicate. An image of this youth rescuing that boy emerged before his eyes. He was radiant and glorious, as if any incurable disease in this world could easily be solved by his hands. If it was him, perhaps he could really cure. It wasn't certain, but maybe. If it was him, perhaps he would have more confidence than himself, and be more successful in accomplishing a miracle. With these thoughts, Zhu Yangan clenched his jaw, his face showing obvious determination. "Ice Lotus Fairy, I'm a person who learned medicine, and we medical practitioners have benevolent hearts and are charitable in our deeds as a fundamental rule. With your conduct of willfully killing a teenager because of hate and jealousy, you don't deserve the title of doctor. Today, this humble one finally knows that the Ice Lotus Fairy, who was originally rumored to be as spotless as jade, with the heart of a bodhisattva, was nowhere near as good as she was made out to be. Good, very good. Since you yourself want to court death, then don't blame me for being merciless." Zhu Yangan's remark was more refined than Dandan's, but the meaning still caused Feng Lianying to become furiously angry. With bloodshot eyes, the muscles on her face slightly trembled because of jealousy and hatred, turning her previously beautiful face into something sinister and distorted. This appearance completely replaced her usually irreproachable image. If it was the normal Feng Lianying, then no matter how much she hated a person, she would have perfectly controlled her temperament and maintained her graceful appearance. Chapter 243, Advancing to Meridian Stage. But today, with her fail in competing over Zijin Palace's inheritance, the hatred she had for Hashi made her extremely irritated. All this, coupled with Dandan, the little golden dragon, and Zhu Yangan's words on top of that, it made her completely lose all rational, and she was unable to maintain her fairy-like image. Zhu Yangan's strength could in no way contend with Feng Lianying's power, and as a result, after just a few short fights, he fell into a disadvantageous position, his body sustaining a few wounds. Watching from the side, Dandan suddenly jumped over in an attempt to distract Feng Lianying and assist Zhu Yangan, but Feng Lianying ruthlessly kicked him away with a burst of spare spiritual power. This caused him to smash into Hashi's body so hard that he ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood. Feng Lianying pointed the edge of her blazing sword at Zhu Yangan, severely striking him. With a bam, the wooden protection tablet in Zhu Yangan's hand shattered into pieces. After which, he staggered before tumbling to the ground, his complexion deathly pale. This wooden protection tablet was a spiritual item given to him by his young master, and it was able to resist the full strength of an attack from a martial artist at the peak of gold core stage. Zhu Yangan had been able to avoid so many of Feng Lianying's attacks so far because of this protection tablet. Now that the protection tablet was broken, and the spiritual power in his body had been used up to the last drop, he could no longer withstand another blow from Feng Lianying. A cold and malicious expression was clearly visible on Feng Lianying's face. Whether it was Zhu Yangan, the two little beasts, or Hushi, she absolutely wouldn't allow them to live. In this world, any person who dared to humiliate her would pay the price 1,000 times over, and they wouldn't be allowed to die a natural death. However, since Feng Lianying was immersed in her hatred, while Zhu Yangan was focused on her and his despair, neither of them noticed what was currently happening with Hushi. As she sat silent and cross-legged to the side, her body began to emit a faint silver light. Dandan raised his small head, and his big eyes welled with tears as he looked at Hushi with a surprised expression. Mother. Along with the light slowly getting brighter, at a rate faster than the eye could see, Hushi's spiritual power started to frantically increase. A tiny whirlpool formed in her dantian, and little by little, it started absorbing the spiritual energy from Zijin Palace into her body. Next, Hushi's cultivation base rose from the peak of Foundation Establishment Stage, to the completion of Foundation Establishment Stage, all the way up to Meridian Stage. Finally, she stopped advancing once she reached the second rank of Meridian Stage. It must be known that in Mi Luo continent, a martial artist's rank was categorized and divided into Qi Refining Stage, Foundation Establishment Stage, Meridian Stage, Gold Core Stage, Nascent Soul Stage, Divine Stage, Void and Darkness Stage, Overcoming Tribulation Stage, and lastly, Completeness Stage. The higher the rank a martial artist reached, the harder advancing would become. It would be as if one was ascending to heaven. For a martial artist with ordinary innate talents, advancing from Foundation Establishment Stage to Meridian Stage would take at least several decades. Even a genius martial artist with outstanding innate talents would need at least 5 to 6 years. But Hushi had unexpectedly, in just one short month, managed to jump to the second rank of Meridian Stage without a cultivation base. If such an advancement speed were to spread out, it would absolutely shake the entire Mi Luo continent to its core. With the silver light slowly dissipating, it ultimately seemed that everything had completely entered Hushi's body. Next, the eyelashes of the youngster slowly trembled as he sat cross-legged, and he slowly opened his eyes. This scene was stunning, yet it all happened within the blink of an eye. So except for Dandan, Feng Lianying and Zhu Yangan didn't discover what had been going on. Seeing the sword about to reach him once more, Zhu Yangan closed his eyes in despair and he muttered 2 words, "Young master." However, the pain he expected didn't come and instead, he suddenly felt something wrap around his waist. Zhu Yangan's body flew into the air, brushing past the tip of Feng Lianying's sword in the nick of time. Almost at the same time, the entirety of Zijin Palace erupted in a burst of dazzling silver and purple lights, as if millions of shooting stars streaked across a night sky, making it difficult for people to open their eyes. Chapter 244, Disappearance of Zijin Palace. Feeling pain in her head due to the blinding light, Feng Lianying quickly covered her eyes. And through the gaps between her fingers, she could vaguely see the blinding white light converging in one direction. A gentle breeze blew past after the light had completely dissipated, and she was shocked to discover that she was no longer in Zijin Palace, but was now standing in a vast field. No, it should be said, that Zijin Palace had completely disappeared. And standing opposite her was Zhu Yangan, who was still in a panicked state. Tied around his waist was a white bone whip, while his clothes were tattered and soaked with blood. His breath was released in pants, as if his spiritual power would dry up at any moment. But Feng Lianying was already too busy to worry about Zhu Yangan, her crazed, unwavering gaze falling on the teenager beside him. "Shi, you're such a shameless person, actually daring to receive the inheritance." Not only had he received the inheritance, his cultivation base had also advanced extremely fast. When he was still in the inheritance void, he was obviously only at Qi Refining Stage, but now he had reached Foundation Establishment Stage. This must be because Zijin's master had passed down some sort of secret technique for him, to enhance his cultivation base in such a short amount of time. If the one who received the inheritance had been her, then perhaps she would have been able to break through to the peak of gold core stage. It was because this stinky brat, this bastard had caused her to lose her inheritance. As soon as Dandan saw that Hushi had awoken, he was no longer able to bear it and immediately pounced into her arms as he loudly cried, "Mother, you finally woke up." What? Dandan was scared he wouldn't see you again. Once Hushi hugged Dandan, she felt that something was wrong. The little pink pig's skin was previously soft and smooth, yet now it had become all wrinkled. Furthermore, the color of his skin was all dull and lifeless, while in the corner of his mouth there was a distinct trail of blood. "Dandan, are you injured?" "What, mother? It was that evil woman who bullied us. She beat Long Long to death, and she even wanted to kill mother and uncle." "What?" Dandan wept with grief. Even though he was still immature, he had never in his life encountered anyone so repulsive and bloodthirsty. It was the first time he had known that people could be so awful, so cruel. Hushi shifted her gaze towards the little golden dragon beside her foot, and saw that he was indeed covered all over with cuts and bruises. And as she examined his dying form, she noticed that even both of his horns were broken, exposing bloody wounds. And laying at her side, with his spiritual power completely used up, was a man struggling to breathe. She instantly recognized him as shopkeeper Ju of Shungda Hall. Chapter 245. Kowtow to apologize. When Ju Yangan didn't see him moving, he became anxious. "Young Master Shi, my spiritual power is used up, and my meridians are damaged. It's certain that I won't be able to escape, so you should quickly go, otherwise, it'll be too late." Hushi didn't pay attention to his words. Rather, she rapidly took out her silver needles and in a flash sealed several of his major acupuncture points. As his acupuncture points were sealed, the spiritual energy and power that leaked from Ju Yangan's damaged meridians slowly stopped, and his pale complexion began to return to normal. Not waiting for Ju Yangan to say anything further, Hushi quickly fished out a few spiritual supplement pills and stuffed it into his mouth, before indifferently saying, "It's only a small injury, why should you make out as if you were half dead? Rest assured, you and I won't die." Slowly he felt spiritual energy gathering in his dantian, and even his meridians which had previously been burning gradually started to cool down. Ju Yangan was astonished, and as he looked at Hushi, his gaze steadily became more respectful. Yet when he saw Feng Lianying's dark expression as she walked towards them carrying her sword, he couldn't help but become anxious. "Young Master Shi, even if you were able to save this humble one's life, with just our strength alone, we're simply not able to be a match with Ice Lotus Fairy. I'll only drag you down." Ju Yangan's words hadn't yet finished, when he suddenly felt his throat clog and he could no longer utter any sound. Hushi coldly withdrew her finger that had been pressing on his voice acupuncture point, and indifferently said, "You're too noisy, go to the side and obediently watch." "Who said that we weren't a match with that damned woman and could only die? Even if I really have to die, I must shed a layer of that vicious White Lotus's skin. In this world, no one can injure she use people, without paying the price." Feng Lianying's eyes were still dark, as if they contained venom. Yet hearing this just as she was starting to calm down caused her to burst into a fit of loud laughter. "Who do you think you are? You're merely foundation establishment stage trash. You think that since you received Zijin Palace's inheritance that you'll be able to go against me? In your dreams." Once that was said, Feng Lianying's expression became extremely dark and sinister. "If you hand over the golden body tree and Zijin Palace now, this fairy will kindly leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. My Liu Li sect has so many methods to torture people, and at that time, I'll let you have a taste of what it means to live in agony yet be unable to die. By then, even if you beg for forgiveness, it will certainly be too late." Hushi sneered, then took a confident step forward before indifferently saying, "If you want me to hand over the golden body tree and Zijin Palace, I can. That's as long as you, Feng Lianying, kneel on the ground and kowtow towards me, shopkeeper Ju, and my spirit pets to apologize. Furthermore, admit to the people in this world that you, Ice Lotus Fairy, are nothing but a reputation with no substance, a woman with a venomous heart. Then, I'll give the inheritance to you, how is it? You bastard, you court death. Once she heard that, Feng Lianying flew into a rage. With a blazing flame springing up around her entire body, the long sword in her hand formed out countless swordlights, one that shot straight towards Hushi. Hushi immediately threw Dandan and the little golden dragon into her space, and seeing the swordlights flying towards her, she abruptly brandished the white bone whip in her hand. The white bone whip transformed into a whip with layer upon layer of shadow, and mixing with a murderous aura that was as cold as ice, it then enveloped the swordlights into a ball. With the movement of Hushi's feet blurring into shadow, she disappeared from where she was currently standing in the blink of an eye. Hushi's ice spiritual power was of course unable to resist a fire attack by a gold core stage martial artist. So the icy cold energy was rapidly engulfed by the flames, turning it into steam before it disappeared without a trace. But within this split-second gap, Hushi had also disappeared. This resulted in the long sword hurtling past and returning to Feng Lianying's hand without success once again. 1. Sword light, also translated as a sword ray. A dazzling, powerful energy attack released from the edge of a blade. Forming sword light generally requires a profound cultivation base and a deep mastery of swordsmanship. But this sword was different from the previous fire attribute longsword. This sword's entire body seemed to emit the coldness of ice spiritual power. The sword flickered, and the spiritual herbs around the sword completely froze, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, the frost spread to cover the ground all around it. Zhu Yangan cried out in alarm, "The ice crystal sword! A top-graded weapon, the ice crystal sword! Don't you have fire spiritual roots? Why are you able to use the ice crystal sword?" Feng Lianying slightly raised her chin, an arrogant smile breaking across her face. "Why do you think this fairy can be called the 1,000-year unparalleled genius martial artist of Liu Li sect? It's because I have the rare dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots of the world." Zhu Yangan was dumbstruck. Dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, where both attributes were completely unrelated. The dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots, were represented when a martial artist practiced water and fire attribute cultivation methods. If practiced correctly, instead of each attribute cancelling each other out, it could result in each one complementing the other. If you were a martial artist with just one attribute of the heavenly spiritual roots, you were already considered to be a rare genius in the world. Yet Feng Lianying was a gold core stage martial artist with dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots. How could young master Shi ever hope to defeat this woman? Chapter 247. Paying the price. If Zhu Yangan were to know that Hushi, who to his eyes had no chance of winning, possessed 5 attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, his jaw would probably drop in shock. Feng Lianying's gaze was filled with contempt as she looked at Hushi. Don't think that just because you were a little smart and have a tad bit of skill that you can regard yourself as a genius. Compared to a real genius, you're still far from that and remain as trash. Ever since this fairy got this ice crystal sword, I've never let it touch blood, so today, the two of you can be the first. Consider it a privilege." Finished speaking, Feng Lianying brandished the ice crystal sword in her hand. Following that, crackling sounds were heard that could make anyone's teeth ache, and in the blink of an eye, it was as if even the air was frozen. Those shadows of Hushi's dispersed into the air one by one, disappearing without a trace. Shortly afterwards, a figure who was running away was firmly frozen by a layer of ice and was completely unable to move. It was Hushi. Feng Lianying burst into laughter, quickly stepping forward. "I said before that I would certainly dismember your body. Brat, now you shall break apart with my capsule of ice." Feng Lianying raised the ice crystal sword, and fiercely threw it towards the frozen Hushi. However, before her sword could reach Hushi, the capsule of ice suddenly exploded with a bright red light. Feng Lianying was startled, but before she had time to react, she suddenly felt an acute pain in her abdomen. This caused her utter a miserable and mournful cry. At the same time she felt pain, her ice crystal sword had stabbed into Hush's shoulder. The broken capsule of ice shattering into an icy powder that sprinkled the tops of their heads. Both of them had beautiful appearances, and under the fall of glittering ice dust, they seemed both stunning and breathtaking. But Feng Lianying's current expression was like she had met a ghost, terrified and filled with disbelief. The two of them were standing very close together. The dagger that had just been held in Hush's hand was now nestled in Feng Lianying's abdomen, while Feng Lianying's ice crystal sword was deeply embedded into Hush's left shoulder. Why? Obviously he had been frozen, but how was he able to thaw the ice capsule? Cold energy from the ice crystal sword slowly spread throughout Hush's wound, but before it could completely freeze the left side of her body, the corner of her mouth curled up into a meaningful smile. Ice Lotus Fairy, it seems that I forgot to tell you, it isn't only you who possesses a gift of dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual root. Furthermore, you seem to have forgotten what I said before. If you injure my people, you must pay the price. Even if I'll die, I will certainly make you pay a big price first. No. This is impossible. Feng Lianying screamed as she fell backwards. As the two separated, a squelch could be heard as the dagger and sword were pulled out of the pair, causing fresh blood to pour from their wounds. Feng Lianying covered the wound on her abdomen with her hands, her face filled with shock, resentment, and defiance. No. I don't believe it. You're just trash, a useless person. How could you and I have the same innate skill? It was at this point that Feng Lianying finally realized that Hushi had deliberately been frozen by her. This was in order for her to draw closer to Hushi and loosen her guard while thinking that she was winning. Just before, Hushi had used her formidable water attribute cultivation method, so Feng Lianying had thought she was a martial artist with a single water attribute spiritual root. Hence, she had never thought that Hushi would be able to escape with only her left side being frozen, until Hushi broke free. Hushi reached out her hand to briefly press down on several of her acupuncture points, blocking the cold energy from spreading further. She then used her fire spiritual power to heat the cold energy corroding her meridians. Thus, her complexion became pale, and her body tottered on the verge of collapse due to the excessive use of spiritual power to halt the ice-cold energy invading her body. Chapter 248, Terrible Poison. But Hushi didn't stop to rest, and instead waved the white bone whip in her hand. Her aura picturesque as she flew over and appeared before Feng Lianying. Feng Lianying, who was immersed in her shock and hatred, suddenly snapped out from her thoughts with a burst of killing intent within her eyes. Bastard, so you want to sneak attack me with your minuscule abilities? In your dreams. After speaking, about a dozen swords appears in her hand and she immediately charged towards the white bone whip. As they collided, the white bone whip was chopped apart inch by inch under the sword swinging, falling to the ground like small worms. As Hush's body was strongly pulled forward by Feng Lianying, she felt a palm harshly strike her chest. However, the moment the spiritual power reached Hush's body she swayed, and like a kite that had its string snapped, she flew into the air before spitting out a mouthful of blood. Feng Lianying had missed Hush's vital organs, but it was still enough oppression by immense spiritual power to make her qi and blood surge, as well as cause pain in her 5 internal organs. Feng Lianying sneered in loathing, detest, and contempt. At this moment, the wound on her stomach had started to recover, and she used her towering frame to look down at Hushi. No matter how hard you struggle, you're just like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Do you really think that with just your tiny cultivation base, that you can successfully attack me? You think I sacrificed my white bone whip and risked being injured in order to attack you? The corner of Hush's mouth curled into a sneer as she continued, Feng Lianying, could it be that until now you still haven't realized that there's something wrong with your wound? Feng Lianying became alarmed and lowered her head to see the wound on her abdomen in disbelief, noticing that it had already started to coagulate with dark spots appearing around the wound. Her previously arrogant voice was now trembling due to fear. What did you do to me? Hushi supported her still stiff left shoulder as she stood up, laughing coldly, I only smeared the drop of an interesting poison on you. This poison initially had no effect towards you gold core stage martial artists since the moment you become poisoned, you just need to take the antidote and you'll be fine. But, Ice Lotus Fairy, apparently you let jealousy affect your mind. Now the poison has invaded your dantian and begun to spread throughout your meridians. How does it feel? This is impossible. How could your poison hurt me? Desperation and panic flashed on Feng Lianying's face. It must be known that martial artists of gold core stage were basically already immune to poison, unless it was highly poisonous like dense viper orchid which was manufactured by a high-level martial artist. Otherwise, a martial artist's body itself would naturally repel the impurities from the poison. But now her body had really shown signs of being poisoned, and the circulation of her spiritual power was also slowing down. That brat was nothing but foundation establishment stage trash. He seemed to be about 16 to 17 years old, so how was it possible that he could concoct such a terrible poison? The long sword appeared once more in Feng Lianying's hand as she aimed it at Hushi and screamed, "Bastard! If you don't want to die, then immediately hand over the antidote." Though Hushi's complexion was pale and her voice was weak, her face still wore an indifferent sneer. "It should be me saying those words. If you want me to hand over the antidote, I can. Now kneel down and apologize for me." "Very well. Did you think that with just an insignificant poison that this fairy would really be afraid?" Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly, a dark red medicinal pill appeared on her hand. As soon as that medicinal pill appeared, it emitted a delicate fragrance. Even if you were to merely smell this fragrance, it could give anyone a feeling of their spiritual power becoming incessantly agitated. Chapter 249, Mutual Destruction. Feng Lianying held the red medicinal pill in her hand with a conflicted expression on her face. This red pill was called a red phosphorus pill. It was one of Liu Li sect's secret protection methods, and a pill that was used to save a life in a crisis. Once you took a red phosphorus pill, no matter how serious a martial artist was injured, it would heal in a flash. Regardless of being infected by any poison, it would also completely clear up. Even the user's cultivation base would rise in a short time period, with their spiritual power increasing several-fold. However, this powerful red pill wasn't without side effects. After taking a red phosphorus pill, the martial artist's meridians would be damaged to a certain extent, and they would lose the possibility of advancing for at least 3 years. Therefore, unless they had reached a moment where they needed to use it as a last resort, the disciples of Liu Li sect absolutely wouldn't take it. Feng Lianying had always been ambitious and lofty. Desperately pursuing Nangong Yu's steps, she had initially planned to advance to nascent soul stage within 10 years to be on an equal level with him. However, if she took this pill, her desire would become only a dream, because it would be impossible to improve her cultivation base in such a short time, let alone reaching nascent soul stage. But just the thought of Hushi, that bastard, as well as his and Nangong Yu's intimate scene, Feng Lianying was burning with the fires of jealousy, completely losing all rationality. So much so that she didn't carefully notice that at this moment, the poison that had been congealing in her dantian was slowly weakening and dissipating. After all, when Hushi had made her poisons, she was only at foundation establishment stage. So for a foundation establishment stage's cultivation base, being able to manufacture a poison harmful to a gold core stage martial artist, that was as difficult as wanting to ascend to heaven. If only Feng Lianying had been paying attention, instead of being blinded by her jealousy and fear, she would have known that the poison simply couldn't injure her. At most, it could only add a few dark spots on her skin. Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly raising her hand, she swallowed the red phosphorus pill. In the blink of an eye, her spiritual power increased sharply from the energy throughout the secret territory, giving off an ominous feeling. The ice crystal sword abruptly appeared in her hand once more, and Feng Lianying's body slowly rose into the air to hover in place. She then looked down in contempt and disgust at Hushi and Zhu Yangan below her, like she would stare at tiny ants. You made this fairy lose the inheritance, and made me pay such a big price by taking the red phosphorus pill." I swear that today I'll cut off your limbs and destroy your dantian, making it so that you'll spend the rest of your life as neither a person nor a ghost in a boundless hell. This is the price you have to pay for committing an offense against me, Ice Lotus Fairy. After her words, Feng Lianying's body shook, and the ice crystal sword fused together with her body as she charged straight towards Hushi like a tornado. Zhu Yangan exclaimed out loud, his face filled with despair. Hushi pursed her lips as she stood her ground, a formidable spiritual power vortex slowly condensing in her hand. This spiritual power wasn't only her made of her own power, but part of her space's unimaginably vast spiritual power. Once this spiritual power vortex exploded, not only would Hushi and Feng Lianying die, this entire area of the secret territory would be affected. However, Hushi's expression only showed a cold determination. There was neither remorse or indecision, rather, there was a determination capable of destroying heaven and exterminating earth, a conviction to die in mutual destruction. She had said once before that even if she should die, she would certainly make Feng Lianying pay a painful price. That price was death. But, just as the condensation of her spiritual power vortex started spinning faster and faster, and the ice crystal sword in Feng Lianying's hand drew closer to her, a sudden scarlet light shone before Hushi's eyes, blinding her. But before she had time to react, it enveloped herself and Zhu Yangan. Chapter 250, Jiyu Liufeng. A loud bang echoed around the area, and the ice crystal sword very quickly turned into steam and evaporated into the air as it hit the barrier of red light. Additionally, the barrier of red light slowly dissipated from the impact of the ice crystal sword, similar to when ice and fire collided and melted. The next moment, Feng Lianying's body was thrown backwards far into the distance. And as she coldly and gloomy glared at the barrier of red light, it disappeared without a trace. Before Hushi had time to react, Zhu Yangan became startled and shouted in delight, "Young master, you finally came." Along with Zhu Yangan's words, a figure in bright red clothes appeared in front of Hushi. From Hushi's angle she could only see that this person was slender and wearing a white mask on his face. Painted on the white mask was a queer ghost pattern, making the person look somewhat sinister. His pair of peach blossom eyes that weren't covered by the mask were gleaming like the reflection of waves under sunlight, a beauty that gave people a one-of-a-kind feeling of attraction. Once Feng Lianying noticed the white mask on the person's face, she couldn't help but cry out in alarm, "Jiyu Liufeng." Although Hushi had never heard the name of Jiyu Liufeng before, she was very aware of Shengde Hall in Yangjing City. While its appearance was that of a small medical store, in actuality, it was a powerful intelligence organization. And the organization behind it mustn't be underestimated. And it could be assumed that the man addressed as Young Master by Zhu Yangan was the owner of Shengde Hall. Jiyu Liufeng unhurriedly opened his mouth and said, "Ice Lotus Fairy, long time no see. I trust you've been well since we last met." Having heard what he said, the look on Feng Lianying's face twisted with fierceness. She didn't understand. All she wanted to do was kill a Foundation establishment stage brat. It should have been very easy, but why did someone constantly appear to hinder her? Is that brat really so lucky? Feng Lianying grit her teeth as she answered, "Jiyu Liufeng, can it be that you want to meddle in my business too? Granted that if you want to meddle, you have to consider whether or not your strength is a match with Liu Li's sec." Since Jiyu Liufeng was wearing a mask, his expression couldn't be clearly seen. But even so, his voice gave a sense of laziness and indifference. "Fairy is so serious. The thing I dislike the most is meddling in other people's business. Similarly Jiyu Liufeng's people, also absolutely don't turn to other people to teach someone a lesson. I wonder how shopkeeper Zhu offended Fairy, to the extent that Fairy was using heavy hands on him." Feng Lianying's gaze shot back and forth between Zhu Yangan and Jiyu Liufeng, a glint of coldness flashing within her eyes as she said, "The one to start a feud with this fairy wasn't really shopkeeper Zhu, but rather that Foundation establishment stage stinky brat. So if you grab your man and leave now, making him vow to never reveal what happened today, I'll let you off. How is it?" After Feng Lianying finished speaking, the look on Zhu Yangan's face became apprehensive. He anxiously looked at Hashi and couldn't help but move his gaze to Jiyu Liufeng, taking quite a while before he mustered enough courage to say, "Young master, I owe young master Shi a debt for saving my life. I can't abandon him, no matter what." However, Jiyu Liufeng seemed as if he hadn't heard him. He just slightly narrowed his eyes as he stared at the arrogant Feng Lianying in front of him and faintly sighed. "It seems as if Ice Lotus Fairy has misunderstood my intentions. Who said I asked you to let shopkeeper Ju off?" Hearing this, a smug smile graced Feng Lianying's face. Since young master Jiyu understands the advantages and disadvantages, then that's for the best. Ju Yangan has dishonored this fairy, so he should be given a lesson. I can promise that this fairy will be able to keep his little life. Chapter 251. Hiding one's ability by keeping quiet. The corners of Jiyu Liufeng's eyes twitched as he continued, "What I mean is, Ice Lotus Fairy, is that since you injured one of my people, let me return the favor to Fairy in the same way you injured him. That way, the grudge between us can be considered as settled." "You, Jiyu Liufeng, you're clearly unable to differentiate between good and bad." Feng Lianying's entire body was shaking from anger. "If you were tactful you would scram, and if you don't blame me for being impolite. Your cultivation base is rather equal with mine, but since I now have the assistance of a medicinal pill, my power far surpasses yours. Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Jiyu Liufeng laughed lazily, his eyes gleaming brightly. "Or, Ice Lotus Fairy could choose to make amends by apologizing to my subordinate." "You're looking for death." Feng Lianying furiously screamed, her whole body like a shadow sword as it shot over towards Jiyu Liufeng. Currently, what she hated the most was hearing others ordering her to kneel down and apologize. Shi Yu, that bastard, had humiliated her. In this lifetime she would never forget this. In the blink of an eye, two figures, one red and one white, were locked together in battle. The two people's movements were extremely fast as they flew about in the air of the secret territory. They were constantly using formidable spiritual pressure wantonly, causing bright lights to bloom in the sky. Ju Yangan watched on in a daze for a while. He felt a tightness in his chest, and although he was also a gold core stage martial artist, his current level wasn't enough for him to be a match in such a battle. Hashi watched on with an extremely serious expression, strangely able to follow the movements of the two people in the air. To her surprise, at this time the two seemed to be evenly matched in their fight, but she felt that Jiyu Liufeng's strength seemed to be far more than what he was exhibiting. Was he hiding it? Hashi frowned and seemed to be in trance, yet suddenly her eyes came into contact with a pair of eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. This pair of eyes resembled peach blossom petals. It was like they gleamed with the reflection of bright multicolored sunlight, but in a flash, these lights disappeared without a trace. Jiyu Liufeng. In such an intense moment of fighting, he was actually still able to be distracted enough to look at her. Moreover, those eyes contained a smiling expression that was deep and yet tranquil, as if they could see through her mind. Hashi suddenly lowered her head, a touch of contemplation sweeping across her eyes. Ju Yangan noticed Hashi bowing his head. With the side of his face delicate and pale, his whole aura was that of a frail yet beautiful porcelain doll that could shatter at any time. He couldn't help but comforted him with, "Young Master Shi, you don't have to worry, as long as my young master is here nothing will happen to us." Although he's only at gold core stage, he's entirely different compared to such a useless person like me. I've also never seen a martial artist on the same level beat him. Hashi raised an eyebrow without answering, instead suddenly asking him, "Shopkeeper Ju, we only met by chance and I have no affection towards you, so why did you want to risk your life to save me?" From the beginning Hashi couldn't figure out this point. She could understand why Dandan and the little golden dragon would save her, but Ju Yangan and her were only strangers by chance. Helping her might be normal, but risking his life to save her was really too strange. Ju Yangan's face showed a trace of shame and indecision as he stayed silent for a long while, before replying, "To be honest, this humble one initially came to Zijin Palace to get the inheritance, but it wasn't for the Mohar inheritance. Rather, it was to get a pill prescription from Zijin's master." Hush's face showed her surprise. She had already received Zijin Palace's inheritance, hence she naturally knew that there wasn't any pill prescriptions included in the inheritance of Zijin's master. At most he only left her an extraordinary pill furnace in Zijin Palace. Chapter 252, 11. Why are you here? Zhu Yangan continued and said, but after seeing young Master Shi, this humble one suddenly felt that compared to a fabled pill prescription of Zijin's master, maybe young Master Shi is our real savior. Savior? What does he mean? Zhu Yangan's body was weak and his complexion pale, but at this moment, he got up from the ground and deeply bowed towards Hushi. Young Master Shi, to be quite honest, this humble one risked his life to save you because there's something I must request of you. Tell me. If this humble one didn't guess wrong, young Master Shi is the genius doctor who healed Ouyang's heir. Zhu Yangan was a little nervous as he looked at Hushi, and it wasn't until she nodded in admission that he heaved a sigh of relief. He then continued and said, after we leave the secret territory, this humble one wants to ask young Master Shi for help with saving a person. Zhu Yangan's words were extremely straightforward, and Hushi released a long sigh. She was most afraid of being slyly schemed against and used as a chess piece. Shopkeeper Zhu's facade was plausible in how he dealt with business, but it was her most liked way of doing things. In any case, it was best to be clear about any business transaction over owing an unfathomable favor. Thinking up till here, Hushi slightly raised her head and lightly said, okay, I agree to your request. It can be regarded as returning your favor of today. The 17-year-old youngster didn't have the slightest trace of hesitation on his face when speaking, and eyes were shining astonishingly bright. If such words were said to others, it would make people feel that he was arrogant. But in the case of this youngster saying it before Zhu Yangan, he felt that it was only right and hence he was incomparably happy and relieved. When the two of them were chatting, Hushi's expression suddenly changed slightly. She sensed many people coming in their direction, each of their auras very powerful and frightening. Furthermore, she didn't know whether it was a group of friends or foes. Just when she was about to warn Zhu Yangan and Jiyu Liufeng who was in the air, Feng Lianying abruptly uttered a pained screech. And like a kite being snapped from its string, she fluttered as she fell backwards towards the ground. Jiyu Liufeng's eyes filled with obvious astonishment, and then narrowing his eyes slightly, he revealed an interested smile. The next moment, a murderous aura as sharp as a sword charged straight towards Jiyu Liufeng. Jiyu Liufeng's expression turned slightly serious, replacing the previously indifferent expression he had when battling with Feng Lianying. With a wave of his hand, a blazing red sword appeared gripped in his right hand. Two swords then collided in high altitude, making an explosion of tremendous energy that caused spiritual energy to fluctuate throughout all of the secret territory. After the explosion, Jiyu Liufeng stumbled backwards a step and slowly fell to the ground. Because his qi and blood were boiling, blood as bright red as a cherry started flowing down his thin lips that were exposed under the mask. "Young master, you're injured," Zhu Yangan exclaimed, then struggled to get up to treat Jiyu Liufeng. Jiyu Liufeng smiled slightly, his deep gaze looking towards the people slowly appearing from not far away. His voice clear as he said, "His Highness Hell King's cultivation base is profound, you really do have a well-deserved reputation." Among the group of newcomers, many of them were gold core stage and above martial artists. In the front, a man dressed in a purple robe had anxiety plastered across his face as he held the deathly pale Feng Lianying in his arms, desperately shouting, "Little sister Lianying, are you okay?" Behind the purple-robed man, walking with an indifferent manner and a gloomy expression upon his face, was Nangongyu with eyes as cold as ice. Nangongyu's icy-cold gaze swept over Jiyu Liufeng, and as they landed behind him, his eyes suddenly widened. "Elevener, how come you're here?" Nangongyu's voice abruptly became high, causing everyone present to almost jump in shock. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.